much for each and every one of you being here tonight. And I'd like to start with the Aboriginal Acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered as the traditional territory of the Tanaha, Silix, and Sinix peoples, and is home to Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land, rivers, and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. And with that, we have an introduction of two late items here, one from Councillor Anderson, one for Councillor Lochtenberg. So one at a time. We need a mover and a seconder to put those on the agenda, and 2/3 vote of council, I believe, to accept them as late items. Right?
Point of order. We did vote to add them to the agenda.
When? Earlier?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. They're on?
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Okay, so moving forward, then we have adoption of the agenda as presented with the addition of the two late items. Moved by Councillor Anderson, second by Councillor Renwick. Questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favour? Carried. Thank you very much. So, adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting for August 17th, 2020. Moved by Councillor Morrison, second by Councillor Renwick. Questions or comments? All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Presentations. Introduction of new staff. And our city manager is going to take charge of that for us. Yeah.
I'll do my best here. So maybe we'll start with Amanda. And Amanda's our emergency management coordinator. And been here about a month now, I believe.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So Amanda,
Come on up, Amanda. You can take that chair there and
tell us a little bit about yourself.
and just pull that microphone down a little bit so everybody can hear you. The whole world is watching.
Okay. Yeah, my name's Amanda. I come from Penticton. Back there, I was working on a consultant basis with local governments. So really excited to join the team. I did my master's degree in disaster and emergency management through Royal Roads. Graduated last fall. And prior to disaster management, I worked almost 15 years with the BC Ambulance Service as a paramedic. So, yeah.
Great. Unfortunately, her leader is
Yes.
supporting her from afar, but Amanda's is trying to move forward our emergency management plan and
Yeah, there's lots to do.
yeah.
So.
Good. Well, we're glad to have you, Amanda. We've just this last year finalized getting that whole system up and running, and we're really excited to have somebody here now that can grab a hold of it and carry us forward, because it's going to be very important to us to have our own space, our own leader, and in particular in these times of change in climate and change in weather conditions, etc., that are happening, and the challenge around wildfires and potential flooding. So
Yeah.
we're excited to have you with us. So thank you
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
much.
I think Glenn did a great job in getting
Yeah.
a base for me to work on, so excited to be here.
Thank you.
Hearty welcome.
Welcome, Amanda.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
And Jan, he's our new manager at Nelson Hydro, and you've been here like a couple weeks now, right? 2 weeks. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Brand new. Well, not quite as brand new as Howard, but
Good evening. My name is Jan Sangalang. I am the new Capital Projects Manager for Nelson Hydro. Originally from the Philippines, bulk of my experience is in thermal plants, coal and geothermal. So hydroelectric is also new for me. Moved to Calgary 5 years ago. Moved to Nelson 2 weeks ago.
Welcome.
Excellent.
Welcome. Yeah.
and again,
Excellent.
I don't know, we hire new people and their bosses disappear. So.
I know this. So listen, we don't want you two characters getting into a fight between Edmonton and Calgary here. So I know there's always a bit of a challenge there with the Oilers and the Flames. So
You're both out. Yeah.
you're both out, yeah. Anyway, welcome. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Howard, do you want to come up and tell us Howard's just brand new and is here replacing Craig Stanley in the Public Works Department.
I'm Howard Hollowatch, came from Edmonton, where I worked with the city of Edmonton for 28 years, I do believe. So lots of roadway maintenance and parks experience. experience, operational planning and stuff like that. I worked on a lot of projects like the snow and ice control manual, and also working with the code of practice for managing road salts and that, and following and working on snow site improvements with the city of Edmonton and stuff like that too as well. One of the bigger projects on the park side was working with, we have what's called the Old Man Creek Nursery there. So we're looking at selling off part of the land and then putting that money into enhancements for the nursery and sort of bringing it to the sort of state-of-the-art nursery. So sort of an interesting project working with real estate, and it's a unique situation because it was actually in the county of Strathcona land, even though it was a city-run nursery. So some dealings with the other municipality and so forth made it very interesting and that sort of thing. So a little bit of my experience. Glad to be here.
Good.
Welcome.
Yes, welcome.
Well, we have no shortage of snow around here for you to play with in the wintertime.
And seatbelts.
You get all the fun you want with snow here.
Where's
Anyway.
the best deal on snow tires?
Oh, I don't know, you'll have to hunt around. You'll find them, don't worry. And you'll need them.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks very much. We're very happy to have everybody on board and getting our staff back up to, we got still a few vacancies left yet, Kevin, but we're getting there. And it's interesting, yesterday I was just saying to some members of council, friends, a couple of friends of mine, we went golfing in Balfour, and one of them was building a house just a 17 mile, and we went up to where he was building, and we were sitting on the platform of the subfloor of the house, and we were thinking, you know, we were talking about COVID and all the other things that were happening and fires in California. And, you know, we're very fortunate to currently be living in probably the safest place in the world. And we're fortunate in this area. And each one of you that have, you know, recently come to the Kootenays, you'll get to understand that over the years, that it's a unique place and very special place that we all dearly love. And we're happy to have you on board with us to experience some of the wonderful opportunities and attributes of our area. Thank you very much.
And not sure if you know our council, but maybe it's a good time to let them know who you are as well.
Yeah, so starting down there, yeah.
My name is Jesse Woodward, and I've lived in this area for most of my life. And the reason I'm sitting in this chair is because I really wanted to help my community in a really hands-on way. And I was doing public work before, and this has just been a wonderful place to engage my community and help out, and I'm really happy to be here. So, welcome.
Hi, I'm Brittany Anderson. I'm a counselor. I also sit as the director on the RD board, and I grew up in Nelson, left for about 10 years, and just love my home.
I'm Janice Morrison, and I've been on council 3 terms now, and I work in healthcare. I've been at our local hospital for 30 years.
Mayor John Dooley, and I've lived in Nelson for over 40 years. My wife was raised in this area, and I'm an immigrant from Ireland, came in 1967, and here I am today. It's amazing actually when you think about it, but very fortunate and great opportunity, and I just, Canada's a special place to me. So, Councillor Page.
Councillor Page, I'm born and raised in Alberta, in rural Alberta, in fact, so the answer to Edmonton versus Calgary is go Canucks. And yeah, just small business and applying problem-solving skills at this domain, and I have a little business around the corner. I love this work, and I love our colleagues and all of you guys and all the work you guys put into it. So.
My name is Cal Renwick. I was born in Nelson. I'm going to die here.
I heard that before.
You'll hear it again. Yeah, I've been very involved in the business community. This is my first term on council, and for Howard, the best deal on winter tires is at Nelson Toyota.
My name's Rick Lochtenberg. I'm 2001 I moved to Nelson, and I'm software developer and entrepreneur, and I'm very happy to welcome you and have join our excellent staff. So really, it's good to have have you on the team. Thanks.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thanks.
You don't have to stick around for the meeting. Believe me, it goes on for a while, so, and don't feel bad if you head out. You're more than welcome to go, so. The rest of you, stay. Thank you very much. We'll see you later. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome again.
Take care. Welcome. Thank you.
Okay, bye, you guys.
Okay, onward and upward. We have development variance permit for 1315 Robson. Development Services received a development variance permit application from 1315 Robinson to reduce the minimum front lot line setback required by the zoning bylaw from 4.5 meters to 1.5 for the purpose of constructing a laneway house. And in front of you folks is a extensive report with photographs, and for those of us that don't read very well, and a recommendation from our staff.
I'll move the recommendation.
And moved by Councillor Anderson, second by Councillor Page. And the recommendation is the application for the development variance permit to vary the requirements of zoning bylaw 3199 2013 for the purpose of building a laneway house be approved for the parcel A, block 3, plan NEP 1135, District Lot 304, Land District 26, 1315 Robson Avenue as per attached plans as follows. And the zoning bylaw number 3199 2013, section 417 of Schedule A to vary the minimum lot line from 4.5 to 1.5 meters. And that's for approval. If there's any questions, now is your chance. Otherwise, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you very much. Onward and upward. Okay. Next is a Friends of Kootenay Lake Stewardship Society request, and this is for a work they're doing along the foreshore, and they're asking for the City of Nelson to approve a grant for tipping fees. And there's a recommendation from council, and if somebody wishes to move it, Councillor Renwick and Councillor Woodward, seconder. And the recommendation is that council approve the Friends of Kootenay Lake Stewardship Society request to pay for tipping fees incurred in their cleanup of the foreshore area between Prestige and Lakeside Park in the amount not to exceed $230. All in favor? Thanks very much. All right, delegations. We're going to have a short recess, yeah. Okay. Pardon me?
Sorry, problem.
Yeah, okay. So we were going to have a short recess, Sam, but you're here to speak to it. We have a couple of people here from Development Services, though, right? So Sam's not the only one, yeah. So you only had the first two, Natalie, right, on the step code, right? So maybe, council, if you don't mind, maybe we'll move it up and then have that recess in between, so these folks aren't bored to death watching us eating cabbage here.
That would be great.
Okay, so I'm going to yield to council if you're okay with that. Fair
Yes,
enough, okay.
absolutely.
So we're going to move on to the report on the step code next steps. And both of you are welcome to come up and present if you're part of that. You'll have to figure out a way to social distance there. Maybe Jesse, you could give up your, move down a bit and allow that microphone to be turned around, maybe Jesse?
Oh, yeah.
Now these guys are in a bubble anyway, so.
Yeah, we're in the bubble.
Yeah, so you're presenting on the step code potential changes, and you got the floor.
Okay. Sorry, I haven't been home yet, so I'm still wearing what I was
That's fair enough.
wearing earlier today. So, but what's that?
I said me too.
You too. Okay.
Kevin hasn't been home in a month.
So, Mr. Mayor, councillors, so I've brought this request for decision forward, and it's a request to consider moving up to higher energy step codes for standard residential building. up to step 3 out of 5, and up to step 2 for more complex buildings. Complex buildings are a little different than residential buildings. In some cases, they max out at step 3 or 4, so it's a little more complicated. But I've tried to provide some background in my report of why I think it's timely to do this, and the request would be to approve it but not put it into force until the end of this year, so December 31st. So hopefully everybody got a chance to read the report, but I'm more than happy to answer all and every question that you have.
Councillor Renwick, yeah.
Thank you. Sam, yeah, I read through it and fine, everything's fine, but I just a little curious, what's a complex building?
So the building code's divided into 2 substantial parts, Part 9 and Part 3. Part 9 would be mostly what we would call housing and small commercial buildings under 600 square meters, which actually is fairly large.
Big, yeah.
But other certain buildings, like of assembly occupancy, like restaurants, because there's groups of people, they automatically get pushed into Part 3 or complex buildings. So it's either very large buildings or buildings that have a higher expectation for safety and things like that. Institutional buildings, schools, hospitals.
Right, okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, so I just did appreciate that for future planning, that embedded carbon is going to be considered and discussed, because that's one of my main concerns about the STEP program is just the embedded carbon piece. So I just wanted to just acknowledge and thank you for including that in the report.
Right, and that's part of the reason I haven't recommended a higher step yet, because there, I think you can run into some problems with that if you aren't looking at the carbon, and the province is talking about it, and there's some the City of Vancouver and a few other jurisdictions in the Lower Mainland are already doing some of this, so I'm hoping to use the time in the next so many months to borrow from them. Yeah.
Sam, I had a couple of points. One was the additional cost, and I know you've laid that out here, and I don't want to argue your numbers, but I would challenge them a bit. However, having said that, the other piece is this allows, additional time for the industry to prepare for the change in the code. The group that's actually being left out of that conversation may be the person that's actually building the house. I'm wondering what kind of outreach we're doing to the community to let them know these changes in the code are coming forward, because as a builder, I would build to the code. I would build to the required code. It wouldn't matter to me if it was steps code 50, as long as I was getting the, contract price for building the house. It really wouldn't matter to me as a contractor. It would matter that I know the code and I could implement all of the steps, but as far as my business model was concerned, it wouldn't really matter. But it could matter to the resident that doesn't understand that there is a step code requirement, and that's going to add additional cost potentially to my home.
Yeah, okay. So there's still, what I'm hoping to do is continue to do, I wanted to get this in front of council sooner than later. So what I still am hoping to do is continue with outreach until the end of the year and then beyond. And it also keys in a little bit with what Kate's doing with her climate action plan. So that's kind of coordinated a bit. What I've been hearing from builders and owners is generally people are pretty interested in making their homes energy efficient for a few reasons. One of them being in the environment, and another one just energy costs. Yeah. I mean, it's a huge driver. The feedback that I've got from almost everybody who's had a newer home built for them to a higher level is they get that, first electricity bill and it's $40 and they're just flabbergasted. Second to that, and part of what I was trying to convey in my report is a lot of the homes that were already being built by our local builders, they're pretty good homes.
Yeah.
And they, in a lot of cases, when they get tested out, were already achieving these levels. So I hear what you're saying, but we have some good builders in town. And I think they're capable of doing it, and even without trying very hard, they're already building these houses, and it seems to be what people want. So, but I'm going to continue. We're going to continue to.
I was
reach
just
out.
thinking maybe we should, do a bit of a campaign around it, because we don't have we're not having the conference we had each year with the trade show, where we had the energy efficient ideas and so forth around, insulation and light bulbs and switches and foam basements, et cetera. So maybe we should do a little outreach to the public to let them know that these are not scary things. Here's the advantages, and here's what you should prepare for if you're planning on building a home.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Maybe just something to think about. Yeah. Okay. So there is a recommendation 1 and 2 here, and do you want these separate, Gabe or Sarah?
Traditionally, we have first and second as
Yeah.
a resolution, and third is a separate.
Yeah, okay. So the staff recommendation is the Corporation of the City of Nelson Amendment Bylaw number 3508, 2020 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only. Councillor Anderson and Councillor Page move in second. Any questions or comments? All in favour? Thank you very much. And 2, that the Corporation of the City of Nelson Building Amendment Bylaw number 3508, 2020 be read a third time by title only. Councillor Renwick and Councillor Woodward. Questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favour? Thanks very much, Sam, for all your good work. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. I was really hoping you guys were going to grill me longer.
No,
I'm not kidding. I mean,
Well,
I'm,
you've been
I'm
here before,
pretty
though.
excited about this.
It
stuff,
didn't
so-
work the last time we were here, so we thought, what the heck's going on?
Okay. Okay. Well.
Oh, we're
Thanks,
excited, and I think that's why it's
Yeah.
a no-brainer. I mean,
Okay.
you got unanimous support because
Okay.
we love what you're doing.
That and dinner's waiting.
I know. I've already had dinner, but I'm going to go home now.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks, Natalie.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks, Natalie.
Thanks, Sam.
All right, now we're on to presentations, which we're going to take a recess, if that's okay with council. So a mover and a seconder for short recess. Councillor Renwick and Councillor Page. All in favour? Carried. So it'll be as quick. I got a scholarship when I was 17. I was sitting in the harbour. It's called a ship.
Turning the AC off.
Yeah.
Okay, folks. Back started here, and we're moving on with it. Okay. We're on to bylaws, number 10, right?
Yes.
Housekeeping. Bylaws. Staff has identified 2 minor housekeeping amendments that must be made to the city's bylaw, notice enforcement bylaw, zoning bylaw. And there's a staff report and a recommendation, and there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if somebody wishes to move 1, 2, 3, and 4, or 1 at a time, you're welcome to do so.
Can I move them together, or you want to do them separate?
I think we could do 1 and 2 together,
Yeah, the first 2 you can for sure.
and then 3 and 4 together.
First time and a second time by title only. Yeah, so that 3 and 4 then.
Okay, so I'll move 1 and 2.
Second.
All right, any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Thank you. And 3 and 4. Mover, Councillor Renwick and Councillor Anderson second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor. It seems like a rubber stamp if you're watching or listening to this, but it's mainly tidying up some loose ends. And road closure bylaw. Council on August the 17th, 2020 regular meeting, Council passed the resolution approving the permanent closure of a portion of Lake Street roadway along the south property line of 520 Front Street in order to allow for a portion of this roadway to be sold. We've had this before us, folks, and there's a recommendation at the bottom of the page that the Lake Street closure bylaw number 3507/2020 be read a first time and a second time by title only. Councillor Woodward, second by Councillor Renwick. Questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. And once again, we've been through this already, and we're now down to third reading. That the Lake Street Road Closure Bylaw number 3507/2020 be read a third time by title only. Mover and seconder, Councillor Anderson, Councillor Renwick. All in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. Okay. The next one is this is a kind of a weird title for this. Waste Management Wildlife Attractant Bylaw Amendment around blue bins. It's a bit confusing, the title. So changes are required by Recycle BC, resulting in the elimination of plastic blue bags from the recycling collection as of July the 1st, 2020. As a replacement, the city provided residential households with reusable blue plastic blue bins to hold recyclables for collection. A change which must be reflected in the Waste Management and Wildlife Attractant Bylaw. Council is now asked to adopt this Waste Management Wildlife Attractant Amendment number 3504. Moved by Councillor Renwick that the Waste Management and Wildlife Attractant Amendment Bylaw number 3504 2020 be finally adopted. Second by Councillor Woodward. Questions or comments? All in favour? Carried. I got to say that new program for me is working really well.
Great.
There's a lot more product now going into that blue bin. And I like that. I like that little sticker that they put on the bin when you have the wrong thing in there, and to check it off. So that's helpful as well to be on top of that. So it's working out really well. I think for most people anyway. Okay, the next one is the Procedures Amendment Bylaw. Council is requested to pass third reading of Council Procedure Amendment Bylaw 3491/2020, which incorporates most of the changes previously presented to Council and addressed in a number of housekeeping issues found in the current Procedure Bylaw. And there is a recommendation there for anyone that's interested. And definitely an interesting read, this. I read through it top to bottom. I had a couple of things that I outlined in it, but nothing of any. Councillor Page, mover. Do you have a seconder?
No, I think he's.
Yeah.
Let's get a mover and a seconder too.
Well, I'm going to move to refer.
Okay, fair enough. Do you have a second?
Second.
Second by Councillor Lochtenberg. Okay, you have the floor.
I do just want to apologize. I didn't quite understand the process at this step. I thought we would debate the changes I thought about, but then of course I think it's just problematic for staff. So I think I need to write these down in a bullet form, share them with Sarah, let her highlight it out, and bring it forward to us. I have a number of them, but I don't think we necessarily need to debate them here. So I'm just again asking us to refer to the next meeting. I will provide these in a document that she can incorporate into the bylaw, and we can review.
Gabe, is there any urgency to this now? If there's
There is no urgency. I think it's really just for council and staff to know what they're working with. So the only point that I would make is that I've heard some people reference changes we proposed that have not yet been adopted, thinking that that's actually in place. And so my only concern is that this stretches off for 6 to 8 months. I do think we would like to get a bylaw in place, but
No, I just thought we would go through these tonight and wait and have a lot of time to talk about each one of them, but I think it ends up being problematic.
well, the only challenge there is that the rest of council don't know what you have there.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you're stalling this process through that, no, I don't mean that, and don't take that the wrong way, but if the process is being stalled and we don't know what your questions are, some of them may be fired out the door the moment you put them on the table. So we should know what you got going there before we decide.
I can go over.
Share that.
I think you need to share it with council.
No, I'll type this up like right away and send it out in the next day or two. Or do you want to talk about them now?
Well, I think we should, because council may decide, you know what, they're not relevant, or they can be addressed by Gabe tonight and incorporate it, and then we'll move on to getting this off the table, and it's one less thing for staff to continue to play around with.
I think, we had an earlier discussion, some of those need us to kind of look at some things.
Excuse me.
There might be just clarity, parts to that, or some may be substantive. There's too much there for us to be able to go, yeah, this is the way it affects the bylaw, or doesn't affect the bylaw. We need to kind of look at them. Some are just changing his and her to them and they. That's
completely different.
right.
Yeah, there's minor ones and big, yeah.
there's others that are, we're not clear if there's substantive changes or what the intent are. You know, I think Councillor Page has some interpretation of what
Yep.
current language is and whether it reflects what the language that needs to be clear or his interpretation doesn't fit with what the language says.
I don't have a problem with you having questions. The problem I have is that should council hear those questions and decide if there should be moved forward or not?
I mean,
Because
I have some questions too, so.
You have questions also?
So we want to do another workshop, it just, we had a workshop, we
Yeah.
sat down, we got some direction, we kind of drafted a bylaw, and now we seem to be kind of circling back to.
I had a couple for clarity, but not that would change, you know, what we were doing, but just so I was clear in my mind.
Well, why don't we finish this meeting, if people still want to stick around for half an hour and go through those and decide what those are, it just seems to, you know.
I think
My thought was that it would be nice for staff to have if there's a number of changes, to have that ahead of time.
Yeah.
So that we could include it in our report, for one thing, and then council would have some time to think about it, and we as staff would have some time to look at legislation and some other documents that we have to look at to make sure that it works with our current bylaws that are in place.
So here's my challenge as the chair. We have a councillor that has a list of questions around the bylaw, so he's asking to refer it. But we don't know what the questions are. So let's say at the next meeting, you had a list of questions about something and you want to refer that. I think it's fair that council, is there any validity to these questions? We don't even know what they are. And yet we're being asked to refer it. So I have no problem with it being referred, but it would be nice if we knew what the questions were, so are they relevant? It could be,
Sure.
God knows what you have written on that paper there.
And our
Do you
challenge as
understand what I'm
staff
saying?
is, we're not in a position to say that makes sense or not makes sense until we kind of have a bit more look into these.
So, cause now I'm just like totally confused, but that's not unusual sometimes. What I don't wanna see is I don't wanna see Councillor Page or Councillor Anderson sending whatever they think is not right or their questions to staff, and then I'm getting a report back from staff, and I'm not too sure what changed or
Exactly.
why it changed. So I would like to have, including the mayor's
Yeah.
questions for clarity, I wanna see those at the same time I think that staff potentially is getting them, so that I can see kind of like, then I would wanna see some kind of like red line thing if there was some validity to, you know what I mean? Cause I'm quite happy with the way this is now.
Right.
So
Me too.
I need to know what's wrong.
So we're speaking on referral here, Janice, okay? So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm just,
Yeah, we would not just blindly incorporate these if they were changing the intent of what the original language is. If there's some language that is a bit unclear because something either any of you brought up, say, geez, this isn't really clear to me, and we go, yeah, you're right, that could be worded slightly different and create that clarity.
yeah,
then
cause
we would redline those and say, yeah,
if I might, supplemental, Mr. Mayor, that, I mean, we pushed this to this meeting so that councillors that had questions could have them sent in like before, and here, we're back at exactly where we were 1 month ago when the question was asked. We didn't have enough time to read it. So it hasn't changed. It's been there for a month, and here we are again, trying to make a decision, and we still got a myriad of questions. I guess that's the point, is that, because I tried to move this third reading, I said, let's move it anyways, and if there's changes, then, and then the advice was from staff was that doing that, we would have to unpass third reading and come back again. So we were given 30 days to look at and read through it again and try to have our questions answered. And so obviously the system fell apart somewhere. It's just that now we're moving this now another month. And are we still gonna have questions in another month?
Yeah, no, I was prepared to talk to these because I thought we would come and we'd have a discussion.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Okay,
So I can go over some of them.
Just a second, Councillor Page. Councillor Lochtenberg has a question.
I think there would be no problem, having seen what Council Page, I had some too, to just list them. List the questions that we're gonna ask. We don't have to answer them here, just so that there's clarity for everybody involved what those questions are. It'd probably take us as long as it take to continue this discussion.
Yeah, true enough.
I'd say we just list them. Let's go
So
for it.
you're referring it on what grounds? And that's what you got there.
Okay, so
And you'll
section.
supply these to their staff.
Yeah, no, like this, I appreciate now, and I apologize for the lack of clarity on my end. I thought we would debate these. Anyway, but it is clear from this discussion, it's better to put them in ahead of time.
So before you go any further about debate on this particular,
Well, we're just gonna I'm gonna scan the questions this time inside
yeah,
the
so on
context
this,
of referral.
but just so clear for yourself, it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong here, there's some things in this procedure bylaw that are not debatable.
Sure.
They're laid out by the government and that's the guidelines that we have to work with.
Yeah, which I think is what Kevin was speaking
Yeah,
to.
so,
Okay, section 4.45, we speak to council reports, we say that they can be delivered verbally. I would move to strike the word verbally so that council reports can simply be delivered in writing, verbally. I think just putting it that a report has to be verbally in the language is problematic for people who might have other learning modalities or presentation modalities. So, and it has been our practice in the past, there have been council reports that were written.
yeah,
So that just
absolutely,
seemed
yeah.
general and to the point. Looking at the common misinterpretation of to table something or to lay on the table, I figured that in section 4.49B that we should explicitly say to lay on the table, because it can be misinterpreted to table something and not come back to it, but if you use the more specific language of lay on the table, that you would intend to come back to it, which is different than to postpone indefinitely. Correspondence, there's section 4.38, the right of appeal on any referral may be made to the city manager. I thought if a correspondence comes in from a member of the public that they want inclusion in on a meeting, that if it did get to a point where there's a disagreement between the proponent and staff on whether or not something should be included in a meeting, that maybe the appeal process should actually go to the chair as the holder of the agenda or the presiding member. In motions generally, I was going to look for RDCK alignment and follow the practice of not recording the mover and the seconder. Just small, tidy task. On the speakers list, section 4.46, we describe lots of ways that we deal with under code of conduct, people interrupting or speaking over each other, etc. But we don't actually outline how people are to raise the attention of the chair. Some places do, but I thought we were getting pretty specific on how we deal with how we overstep, but we don't deal with how we actually raise the attention of the chair. Do we stand? Do we wave a hand, etc.?
I think that's covered in there, but anyway.
Maybe I missed
No, it's
it.
okay. No,
I didn't mean to. And then I lost the section on this because it got stapled by accident, but under points of order, there is I think it's one of the sections that talks about basically the gist of adding some language to the end of it, unless raising a motion, that is to appeal the decision of the chair to council. So there's some language specifically around the chair ruling on points of order, and that no one else will speak or make a motion during that time. But I thought, and this could just be an interpretation problem or something that could get some clarity from staff on, that if you were making a motion to appeal the decision of the chair, that type of motion should be permitted. So, that is the breadth of them. That's not an exhaustive list, but I thought. Oh, and more, somewhat importantly, maybe just politically timely, is I thought we should pull all the gendered terms and replace them with theys and thems and theirs. An easy one to end with.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going through my list right now. First thing, so 2.10,
It says no decisions may be made at the council committee of the whole meetings other than recommendations which have received the majority of vote on council. To me, that's confusing because we're not allowed to make decisions other than recommendations that have the majority vote. We only make decisions by majority vote or higher. So I didn't understand that. I understand in general we don't make decisions at the committee of the whole, but we also have in the past made some decisions at the committee of the whole. So that will be one of them. Another thing is at least 48 hours before a regular open council meeting or committee of the whole, the corporate officer must give notice of the meeting, including confirmation of the time, place, and date by. So posting a copy on the notice board, providing a paper or electronic copy to each member of council, posting a copy of the meeting at the public notice posting places, providing a copy of the meeting at City Hall for review or for viewing by the public. The only thing I also wondered is if we should be posting on social media, because it's a lot on the public to have to go to our website when, basically they would have to be checking it within 48 hours to ensure that they were notified of that meeting, where by posting it on social media, it's a sort of lazier form or an easier form to get it because it's sort of automatically delivered to you through that medium.
Just to let you know, I believe they are all posted on our Facebook page. Our communications person, Lester, takes care of that.
Okay.
I would just know that some of the, for example, there are things we might do that go above and beyond what's set out in the council procedure bylaw. For anybody that has comments, I would just note, we were working off a version that was adopted in 2011.
Yeah.
And, I think, just to take a step back too and think about what staff was trying to do. We identified some pretty glaring errors, whether it was typographical or some things that were really confusing to staff. So that's where we focused our efforts.
Okay.
I think these other comments are welcome, but I'm just trying to also shed some light on, our approach on that first cut.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you for that clarification. So some of these, again, might, same with notice of special meetings. It was my same comment. Again, now that we've experienced COVID, so no more than 2 members of council at one time may participate at a regular open meeting or committee of the whole meeting under section 2.23B unless authorized by mayor or by a majority of council in attendance at the meeting in question. So I just have a particular problem with this one. What if, I just ran a bunch of different scenarios, and so what if Councillor A is going to be attending virtually and that has been prearranged ahead of time? Councillor B has COVID and wants to participate electronically, and Councillor C woke up with a cough and wants to attend virtually to ensure they are following pandemic protocols, but the presiding member is particularly invested in the outcome of a particular RFD. Could the presiding member then exclude one councillor from participating so that the vote is perhaps slanted in one way or another? I just thought, it's not that it has happened. It's just a hypothetical that I think that is something that I would still like to, for us to consider at the table here. There's just a few more.
May I for a moment on that one?
Yeah.
Would we consider that if some have been allowed to participate electronically, we want wording that all or some more than one could? Is it really just about the 2? Because I think it's either all or nothing. There's some people can attend electronically or nobody can.
I think
the limit on 3 makes.
The original intent was to encourage councillors to be at the council table.
Yeah, 100%.
And not, decide that I'm going to participate in this council, from somewhere else. There's rules around if you miss so many meetings in a row, then you can be disqualified from office, et cetera, et cetera. So it was really, the intent was not obviously to deal with a worldwide pandemic or that sort of thing. It was really to encourage that the debate should happen at this table with people present and really try to discourage people participating otherwise, or sometimes don't have a full reports. There's a bunch of things that make it difficult when you're not in attendance. So that was the original purpose, and this language hasn't changed a lot from the beginning.
Yeah, I would just note on what CEO Cormac is saying and what Councillor Anderson has alluded to is that section, was kind of rethought in light of 2 things. did bring a minor amendment with regards to that section back in March, right when the pandemic hit. I believe council did first 3 readings, and then the province came out with an order that changed the dynamic, which no longer required us to go forward with that bylaw amendment to have electronic participation. So we then scrapped it. But what was nice is that we had the input from council, and we saw that that section was important to this group. And so the old version, the one that's currently in place, I believe says you can only have 2 participate electronically, and it gives the mayor that final approval. We saw that that was a touchy issue for this council, and so we changed it. The mayor has that approval power, or a majority vote of council. We thought that struck a fair balance, and so that's kind of the thought process there.
My question is then, when would that vote be?
That vote would be at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
It says that electronic participation is considered as if you're there, so you get to participate in that vote.
Okay.
So that was, we did think that through.
And so what would happen if, okay, it's just something that I still, like, I could see it, then who is decided to be the person that might not get to participate for whatever reason? I decided to go live in the Yukon, and you guys are like, no, Brittany, you keep trying to participate from somewhere else,
Your council,
like you want to boot me out.
council would make that decision, right?
Yeah, okay.
The language
If you're living in
says,
the Yukon, then maybe you should not be on council.
so I'm
No,
just wondering about the
absolutely.
language. It says by a majority of council in attendance at the meeting in question. So does that include the people that may or may
Yes,
not
it does. And
be
that-
on
that-
the meeting?
That is in the bylaw. It says electronic participation is considered to be in attendance in person, and so the way I viewed it was that,
Yeah.
everyone that's there at the beginning of the meeting will be able to take part in that vote.
Got it.
I think it's great that you guys are, going through the bylaw and looking at these and coming up with hypotheticals. It shows that you're really paying attention to the bylaw, and it makes me feel like I'm back in law school. So, good.
Okay, and so then just for clarification, would it be sort of the vote as a whole or the vote as individual people in that scenario?
As a whole.
As a whole, okay. Which is so interesting.
I don't understand that.
Yeah, I don't understand that either. So if you're voting as a whole,
The council will vote as, everyone that's present at the meeting. Would
right?
vote.
So if there are 7 people voting and 3 people were at home and the 4 people here decided no, the people at home
It
don't.
includes the
But
7
you get
people,
to
all
involve 3
7.
from home. At the beginning of the meeting, you get to vote.
Yeah.
Right.
7 people would be voting.
Okay.
That's the whole.
Right, but technically, if the 3 people, if everyone who's not at the table, if everyone who's not in person, you could just decide like, no, those 3 people at home.
But you're
Don't get to
agreeing at the
participate in.
beginning of the meeting to allow those other 3
Right.
people to participate.
So an example of that is you could have a public hearing. Where you're supposed to hear from the public. And we've had this where someone has not participated in that, then wants to vote on that item in the regular meeting, which puts council at risk that you're obligated to hear from the public, and you choose not to do that, and now you participate in that
In the vote.
vote, that's putting your council at risk. That people there may say, we're not willing to take that risk. No, you can't participate in this regular meeting. If you want to be there, you need to be able to be there for the public hearing and the rest, right?
Right.
And if you were able to participate in the public hearing and be involved in the whole thing, then presumably they say, okay, well, that's fine, you can participate in that vote. But ultimately,
Okay.
the risks are choices that we have, and if you want, like I said, the spirit of this was trying to encourage people to be out there.
Yeah, no, and I definitely want people to participate in public. Just the pandemic has definitely put a new spin on that for me. Another question I had was public participation, and I'm wondering if delegations should actually come before public participation, and just because public participation can kind of throw off a meeting at times, and so it might be better to hear from the actual delegations first. It's just something to consider. And again, with late items needing a 2/3 vote, I know we talked about that, but I do think it should just be a majority vote and to introduce a late item, because then of course it's going to be debated. And then in terms of 4.46H, what if it is the presiding member that is not in alignment with the like conduct and debate rules. Right now, there's no way, if it's the actual presiding member, there's no way for council as a whole to deal with that. It lies solely with the presiding member. So we just might want to consider what would happen in that case. And my other question is, an amendment may only be amended once, or an amendment may be amended only once. I feel like we don't practice that at the table, actually. Often I think we've done an amendment and then amended that amendment. So I understand from staff's perspective why it's more clear if we only amend something once, but I think we've done we call them friendly amendments, but there's actually no such thing as a friendly amendment. But generally this is because there's been, a word or a phrase, or there's something that's missing or incomplete. So to have it in this bylaw, that wouldn't give us the ability to do that, or could prevent that from happening, which.
That's in the current bylaw as well, Councilor Anderson.
Yeah, okay, so we're not adhering to it then.
So in that case, that's an example of, that's my responsibility, right? But that's an example of, if council wants me to run the meetings like that, then we can do that. But there's been occasions where there's been an amendment come up to something. It appears as though it's a good thing, it's going to move forward, so it's best that we get the amendment right. So I've allowed the liberty to sort of dot the i's and cross the t's in some cases, right? Which
right. No, and I
helps us get to a conclusion rather than a maybe nowhere, or maybe a defeat of the whole thing.
Yeah, no, and I do appreciate that, but I think that sometimes allowing that flexibility, I see how it has been a benefit at the table by ideally we are following this procedural bylaw, and if we're going to say except if we're going to do the amendment of the amendment, we'll let it slide. It doesn't then, we want to be following what we're putting in this. We're the ones that are deciding on this, and if it's something that we do on a regular basis, something that we're sort of ignoring on a regular basis, then I just think it's something to be considered that should be excluded from this bylaw.
Okay.
And yeah, anyway, those are the types of sort of questions that I have. One last one. Copies of resolutions to council members. So 6.2. A resolution that is to be introduced at a council meeting should be delivered to each council member before the council meeting. So my question is, you have to state your intended resolution beforehand. What if during the meeting or immediately prior to the meeting, the councillor determines that a resolution should be placed in front of council? There's been times where we've heard, from staff. We've read our agendas. We've heard from staff, and one of us goes to introduce a resolution that wasn't necessarily a recommendation from staff, but fits within sort of the context of what we're doing. That would prevent us from doing that. Is that correct?
My only comment, Councilor Anderson, is that it's also in the current bylaw. And so I think, what the mayor was getting at is that not everything in the current bylaw is followed, to the strictest, not everything is followed to the letter of the law, so to speak. I think, what's in the procedure bylaw is there so that if you have issues, you have commenting to address, you have a rule book to go back to. If the council has working procedures that seems to do the trick, I think that's where these things aren't always enforced, to the maximum effect. So that's in the current bylaw, and in my review, I didn't see a need to change it. I think it is best practice, if you notice you're bringing a resolution, that it will be available to all the councillors ahead of time and staff as well. I think that allows for better decision making.
Okay.
And I think you have to remember, this was built off, the original one was built off the LGMA template. That was a provincial-wide. This language isn't made up in Nelson. This was provincial-wide recommendation for this language. That's where we're starting from. So a lot of this language would be in the majority of procedure bylaws in every local government across the province. There's good practice in here. Understanding, in this case, if you're going to bring a resolution, it'd be good for fellow councillors to be able to look at that, staff to look at that. Can you change your mind between now and yes? Yeah. You don't ever have to put it on the table. You could decide, no, actually, after more thought, I don't think we need to bring this resolution.
It's more or less it's a courtesy thing and a sort of working together thing. It's
Yeah.
the toughest thing, one of the toughest things to deal with is when a motion comes forward like right out of the blue on a particular issue. You know, it's not to say it wouldn't pass or it wouldn't get traction, but, you know, the reality is, at least for the chair to know that it's coming down the pipe doesn't hurt, right? But on the rest of council, it helps them too to make an informed decision, because a lot of times what happens with late items like, or a late motion like that, is that it does run the risk of everything being sent back to staff.
Yeah.
Completely, you know, so.
I mean, we had a perfect example of this today. We had our special meeting, we had a resolution that came out of that special meeting, and, you know, we kind of worked together to put that resolution on the fly. And so I just want to be careful that we're allowing ourselves to do that, and that we're allowing each other to do that.
I think we have, though.
Right, but it's just, again, if we're supposed to be doing what we say we do, right now it says that we don't do this, even though it does happen, right? So we should be following our own policies. I realize that we want to have some flexibility. I hear you that this is to kind of go back to if there's any issues. But again, if we look at things and we say, well, sometimes we do this, you know, it says this, but often we do that, but then we're expected to follow other things to the letter, it creates a bit of a gray area that leads to some ambiguity with how something like this would be interpreted.
Councillor Anderson, some
Yeah.
of the language, like it says should be
Okay,
delivered.
yeah.
So just watch for those kinds of words. It means that a best case scenario
Yeah.
is that it is delivered ahead of time to all of council and staff.
Mhm.
But it's not, sometimes it's just some guiding
Okay.
principles to make meetings flow better and for better decisions to be made.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that when words like should rather than must,
Yes.
we've got some flexibility there.
Okay.
And you
Thank
end
you.
up with a situation potentially, you know, for instance, this group that's here tonight, something could come on the floor that you need Natalie here to actually fill in the blanks, and they're not
Of
here.
course.
So then council's not making an informed decision.
And
So
it
you end
gives
up,
your
you know,
corporate
so
officer
it
a
gives you
chance to
time
say,
to,
you know, actually that is a different topic than
Yeah.
what's on the table here. You need to introduce that as a late item or some other mechanism. As we've seen where it's sort of related, but really not related. And Sarah or Gabe had that ahead of time, they would say, well, actually, you know, you're making a decision on this. You know, the word is the same, but it's actually a different topic. If you want that considered by council, you need to go the notice of motion, you know, is it urgent or whatever those things are. Just, if you have typed that out on a piece of paper and you're gonna put it on the table, then share it ahead of time. We'll avoid all this confusion at the table.
if it's okay, Councillor Anderson, I know you're not done, but.
I am done.
Oh,
I'm done. Thank you.
Councillor Lockenberg, I was gonna give him a chance to get a kick at the cat here, so.
Yeah, so I had a few as well, but if we don't need to, I'm happy to go to the question. But if you want, I can also add 2 of my items. Yeah, would that help? Okay, so notice of motion. I know we proposed and talked about this earlier, and it makes sense in one context that you're looking to prevent the abuse of the process by one rogue counselor who's like throwing notice of motions on the table. I was thinking through that on the weekend and realized what you would get is you know, some unintended consequences. If somebody felt that they were being constrained, overly constrained, number one, they would start to abuse other parts of the process. Like, it's just going to happen. They're going to get frustrated and they're going to start abusing other things. So we wanted to be careful about that. And so the avenue for a counselor to get something on the table is the notice of motion. But then having a vote on the notice of motion is fine. I don't have a problem with that, except for that it implies and probably requires that there would be debate, which implies or requires that there's background information, that the person who is bringing forward the notice of motion would have an unfair advantage because they've been thinking about this, they've been preparing for it, and the rest of the council would have to be voting based on that counselor's information. So it's something I'm happy to just to flag and talk about if we're gonna
Yeah, I think that the notice of motion, that's an interesting one, because I think the notice of motion, you could put it forward, and you may find when you sit down to go over with staff, it's not a done deal. You can withdraw it.
Sure, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so you got, like, I know as the chair, you gotta be careful with, that a notice of motion is not a notice of motion that we're gonna do this. It may be that, you're gonna have that conversation, and after that, you may decide, okay, it's not relevant anymore. It's being dealt with over here, or it has to completely change, so.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with doing that, but, I think the easiest way to handle those situations, what I do is, and I learned, like you did, believe me, is, I'll go in and sit down with one of these folks and say, here's what's on my mind, and they'll fill in some of the blanks that maybe I haven't thought about, and you find, oh, we're all okay, or we're not, and then you can move forward with. And
Yeah.
you're probably better prepared to deal with it as well, with that knowledge in your mind when it comes actually onto the table.
Yeah, which in the best or even normal case scenario, I think that's exactly what would happen. I'm thinking about some of those edge cases that wouldn't be happening, I expect, at this council, but I could see scenarios, not even that unlikely if you look around the province at some of the past councils and some of the formations of the past councils, that you can get, a process where a councillor feels like they have no avenue to get something to the
I've seen
table.
that happen, actually.
Yeah, and so at least this.
Say, okay, I'll do a notice of motion then, so.
Yeah, you do a notice of
It's
motion.
almost
and-
out of spite rather than out of,
Right,
yeah.
but they know if it's there they've got an avenue, they can put forward this notice of motion, and then sure, if the council wants to vote on whether to move forward with that motion, then there's gonna have to be a debate about it, because otherwise you're voting on something you don't, so I'm just saying, I wanted to flag that.
So that's more or less the how rather than the
Yeah,
reality.
there's a how to it, but that was the thing I wanted to flag, and I think I agree that referring this to staff is the way to go, because there's a lot here already, so I would.
Are we all good? So you got an idea here, so we're gonna call the question on referral. And it appears to me as though there's enough information fired out here tonight that maybe that's something we should do to correct some of those, what council believes needs to be at least looked at and analysed by yourself and Sarah and Kevin, and come back with another revised version. So, all in favour of referral? Opposed? Okay, carried, thank you. All right. City of Nelson nonprofit use of land policy. Jesus, Sarah, this one disappeared off my screen, so I'm sorry. Do you have it there? Yeah, that's the second one now. September the 8th, regular, okay. Use of city land by non-profit organization. To replace the existing policy addressing use of city land by non-profit organizations with a modernized policy. And I'm sure you folks have had an opportunity to look at this, and if you had, there's a recommendation. And if somebody wants to put something on the floor, preferably around the recommendation, then we can work on it. Moved by Councillor Renwick, second by Councillor Morrison. And the recommendation is that the Corporation of the City of Nelson use of space for other groups policy 0810000010 be repealed, and further the Corporation of the City of Nelson use of city land for non-profit organizations number 0810000015 be adopted. And it's in here.
I just have a question.
And Councillor Anderson has a question. Nothing from the mover or seconder? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
So, I mean, I like that this is cleaned up. The only question that I have is that some nonprofits, we are charging sort of market value for that space, and with this, others were not. And I would say some of these other nonprofits that we are, charging this rental space to, they are providing, they're a nonprofit organization that's registered. They are providing a tangible benefit.
And then my question would be, does not conflict with any current or anticipated use of property by the city. So I guess that's where the wiggle room is, but I'm just thinking about these organizations that, have come to us or, are struggling in different ways or, trying to make it work and trying to make the ends meet. And, we say we have a policy, this is how we charge you with that policy, but then we also have another policy and we might not charge you or charge you a lot less than market value. So I'm just trying to reconcile those two pieces in my mind.
I don't know if there's any nonprofit or charging market value for rent.
Okay.
Your policy states the non-market rent for those nonprofits. I think it's 5% of assessed value for nonprofits, and we only charge market rent to those for-profit groups.
Okay.
And Councillor Anderson,
Yeah.
this policy speaks more to some, many nonprofits do have a fee associated with participating. This policy really speaks to those groups that don't charge a fee at all,
Okay.
but need space.
Yeah.
And provide a relevant and important service, like AA, for example.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's what this policy is for.
Okay.
Sort of, yeah.
I just didn't, I don't, I know it spoke to sort of who would be, but yeah, in terms of, I don't think I saw it anywhere in here that, these organizations do not charge a fee.
Yeah. It's actually not in there, is it? For the people,
No.
Right.
I thought I read something about it.
we want in there.
I don't know if it's appropriate or inappropriate. I'm just wondering for other people that right now feel like we're charging them too much rent, that they come and say, well, look, like I don't want to go with that bylaw. I want to go with this bylaw. I mean, this one, I'm entitled under this to, it's not market value, but essentially I could be getting a free space. And I do agree that there's, there's just, it's just two people are asking the same thing. And how are we parsing that out? If it's, organizations that aren't charging a fee, or there's like some sort of other model to follow, but otherwise, how do you decide you are going to be charged a fee? It might be less than market value, but a fee nonetheless, and your group isn't not going to be charged any fee. And again, I don't have a problem with the idea of the policy. I just don't know in terms of that implementation piece.
Well, maybe it does come back to that, to the piece of, is your group charging a fee or not charging a fee?
Okay.
Why don't we kind of have a more discussion on this? That's a good point. Create clarity. We don't want to have two policies that
Contradict each other.
other and people trying to cherry pick them.
Yeah.
Like, we're not in the business to lease space for nonprofits, right? In certain cases, historically, we've had nonprofit basically deliver city services.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's recreation services or, museum or capital, we, I think, view those as a nonprofit delivering city services, and generally those groups have stepped up and said, we're going to save the Capitol Theater and do all this work to get it fixed, and then we'll deliver, we'll deliver this service to you. And I think in recognition in the past, councils have said, we're willing to, you put all that effort in and you run the program and it's something the community needs, versus sort of an external nonprofit providing a social service and recreation service or whatever that says, well, I'm looking for a space now to deliver my service. So I think there's some history of kind of how we got to where we are, and we're trying to, the AA example is in the seniors building, and there's some, we're still trying to figure out, there's some notion that the province gave that building to the seniors group, and I don't know how they got in there or whatever, but they're in there, they have a long history. Somebody's trying to, create some clarity around what their situation is
referring this?
versus.
Yeah,
Are we
so
referring
we'll
this?
refer.
Are we referring
Let's
this?
just refer this.
Okay.
Have another
Well, we need to
look at it.
defeat the current motion, right? And then
Do we
we'll
hear
vote?
No, we just refer it, right?
It's just the resolution?
I think it's been moved.
Yeah, it's been moved and seconded, so we have to defeat this
Yeah.
motion and then refer.
I think you can refer, but, yeah.
So,
Because you might just pass it this, you can defeat it if you want.
yeah, we have to defeat the current motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we'll refer it. Motion to refer.
Makes sense to
Yeah.
me, but.
Okay, all in favor of opposed? Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Referral.
Move referral,
I'll
Councillor
second.
Morrison, second by Councillor Anderson. And the reason being, you want that clarity and you got the drift of what was talked about, folks? Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Anderson.
We call question, refer.
All in favor? Carried. Thanks. All right. Next up is shovel-ready projects. The city manager presenting an update to council with regards to the status of a number of shovel-ready projects that have been pursued in line with council's economic stimulus and financial stability 25-point action plan. The city-led projects are as follows: Hall Street Pier, new library building project, civic theatre upgrade project. That's the ones we're dealing with. It goes on to say council has been successful in advocating for other major capital projects that are being funded by the provincial government that have recently announced. These include the health campus of Mount St. Francis and a new electric-ready ferry for Kootenay Lake. These two projects, along with an estimated value, economic value of $100 million, at least. Send me the
So-
check.
Yeah.
So, we had a special meeting to really deal with one component of the Hall Street project. And that seemed to cycle back to why were we even doing this project, or how did it come about, or what objectives are we trying to achieve, and I guess this is to create clarity. We had brought this to council a number of times. Council's been involved in the scoping of this project, the delivery, the way we're looking at delivering this. And then there seems to be this underlying thing about, how did it even get on the table, which I thought we had explained, but maybe I'll do that again. So basically, actually this started with the Lady Bird.
That's
We
the
had-
pier project.
Yeah,
Okay.
isn't that the first one on here?
Okay, you're starting with number one, that's fine.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Kevin, can you just turn your mic on, please? Sorry.
There we go.
So, so actually the Hall Street really started, well, two things started. One, we did, a previous council did a downtown waterfront plan. So there was some provisions in our OCP that one of the goals was to do a waterfront plan. That work was done with, a community group had done some work at this one at one time, and council never really moved that forward. And in discussion with development services, it seemed to make no sense to do a waterfront plan separate from our downtown plan. It really made a lot of sense that these two areas really needed to work well together. So that really, and we got funding through the federal government to do a sustainable downtown waterfront plan, and that was the genesis of, and that is your policy documents. Those tell us as staff what policies we're trying to move forward. It tells our consultants what they need to consider when they're bringing forward these things. That is your policy work. And those are where your objectives and your policy goals, all those are in those planning documents. So if you don't think they're reflecting of today or where you believe as a council, that's the work you need to do, is update those, because the rest of us are working based on those documents. That's what we're doing. That's what we're trying to advance, and we're looking for projects, grants, partnerships, opportunities, et cetera, to advance those goals. So under the downtown waterfront plan, there was one of the strongest recommendation is how do you create stronger connections between the downtown and the waterfront. And Hall Street was the only one you control. That's the only way you can get from the downtown waterfront illegally, other than crossing CP tracks that we heard about previously. So that's the policy document. The whole downtown, Stores to Shores met 9 of the 10 of those policy objectives, goals that you were trying to achieve. That's why the council before that approved that plan. That's why approved the planning to do that job, and that's why this previous council actually delivered that project. At that time, the pier wasn't included, mostly because of budget, and we didn't have the budget to do that portion of it, so it wasn't included in that project.
Just on that note, prior to me not being a city hall, the pier was questioned by Public Works for years. The safety of it, the deterioration, and we just said, it'll be fine, and we moved on.
Yeah.
So the piers, there's nothing new about fixing the pier. How we fix it and what it looks like, there's something new about that. But they were never asking, they were asking to fix the platform, fix the pier.
So basically what happened was there was this grant available through CBT, actually the Cultural Development Committee and Joy. We also, this plaza was identified in the downtown waterfront plan of one of these focal points that we were going to improve over time. She wanted to put forward a grant for this, and we said, well, actually, we've always looked at, can another building be cited on this, and to build a plaza without understanding whether another building could be cited on this didn't seem to make a lot of sense. But we do have, there's a desire to bring the Ladybird down to the waterfront, and then in the interim, Public Works said our pier is failing, that we need to, re-upgrade that. So, I think as staff, our job's to put kind of two and two together and say, okay, well, we need to upgrade this pier. We need to, there's a grant available. We're trying to accommodate the Ladybird. How do we accommodate all this in a potential project? So that's why that came up. And we proposed that we do two things. One, do a study, a feasibility study for this property to decide whether and where another building could be sited on this. And two, go ahead and apply for that, engage Matthew Stanley in this case to develop a plan for the pier, which he did and brought to council with a budget and a delivery method from the beginning, that this was a tight budget. And he at that stage, at that beginning stage, I thought, let's just get a grant to kind of redeck this thing and not really do anything. And he brought a bigger vision to council, and council put their hands up and said, yeah, we like that bigger vision. Here's all the things it's doing. And that's how that project ended up and being available. And at the very beginning, he said, this is a tight budget. If you want this to be this focal point that I presented to you, you need some community partners to come in here. There's some key folks that make sense for this project. And we reached out to them and said, are you interested? They said yes. They wrote letters of support. They engaged to help in that design, and so that's kind of how the project was initiated. That's what the policy and objectives we were following. All those things I thought were kind of approved by council all along. So if there's something I'm missing, then please let me know.
Yeah, through the chair. So sort of how you've recalled this is exactly sort of how I recall it happening. I think this is, and I don't have a problem with that. I think one of the challenges that I face sometimes, around the council table or during strategic priorities is that, you know, people will bring up ideas and there doesn't seem to be the staff time for it. You know, the project is a lot more, you know, it ends up through communication with staff that it really becomes, it never ends up on that strategic priority list. And, you know, and we've had some pretty clear strategic priorities, and some of them, it's wonderful to see these being implemented by staff. But then there's other things that I think we've tried to put on there that doesn't, because we're told there isn't the staff time for it, it doesn't ever sort of land. And then a project that, of course, it's in alignment with, the master plans for 2040, all of these different things. But, you know, for us, we might have heard that there needs to get new decking, and that's great and it's important. But then all of a sudden, you know, we're packaged this beautiful pier, which I think is wonderful, and it might be in alignment with those plans, but it was never in alignment with this council strategic direction. And so I just want to be, you know, I've voted in favor of all these projects. I do support these projects. I would just like to see moving forward that when, you know, that council is able to set that strategic priority. And of course there's always going to be things that come up. I mean, COVID's the perfect example of something that comes up that none of us anticipated or expected, but that we kind of keep going back to, you know, we have those plans in place, but a lot of, but ensuring that strategic direction from council is consistently referred back to, and that staff's looking at that, but that we're also looking at that, as we move those things forward. And I have no doubt that it falls exactly in alignment with these plans, but there's a variety of different projects that are going to be able to fit within those plans that might not be this exact strategic priority for council, because there's certainly more things in those plans than we're able to put, in terms of strategic priorities. And so when we're, when we're trying really hard to get something on the table, but then, it doesn't stick, but then something that's kind of, alignment with these plans, but a little bit out of left field for us, but then packaged beautifully, it's, very hard to say no to, but it would be good if we were following our strategic plans from the beginning. So thank you.
Well, I'd say we are following your strategic plans. Part of your strategic plan is upgrading our core infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Part of our strategic plan is creating these amenity and focal points. That's in your strategic plan. If you go back and refer to it, those are, if you look under those areas, that's in your strategic plan. And, at any point, we said we were going to engage this consultant. Mm-hmm. At that point, if you don't think this is something you want to do at that time, that's the time to do it. Like, once we engage them, then that's to us. You've asked them to go ahead and develop this to a stage where you're going, yeah, we want to build that bigger vision, or we're just actually quite happy to just repair the deck. So.
Mm-hmm.
Councillor Woodward, then Councillor Page.
Thank you. So I just want to say that with these projects, I understand what you're saying, Councillor Anderson, but I think that also we have to consider that these projects are part of repairing and upgrading our city-owned infrastructure. Mm-hmm. They are stimulus packages for our town, in the sense that we're engaging many different businesses to be involved in these, and it does bring in capital investment into our city, which due to COVID, I think is pretty critical these days. So in some ways, I feel like these projects are really for the next 5 years of keeping development coming into our town, bringing in new jobs. And that's kind of part of, I think, our mandate as council, is to make sure that things are economically doing well, even though we've been really, like a lot of places, hit pretty hard by COVID. So I feel like these three projects that are listed here, or actually 4 projects that are listed here, are are important, and we actually have to tackle them. That's the other thing, is we have to tackle them at some point. And I think in many ways COVID has given us an avenue to tackle them in a way that really can help our community and hire a lot of people and engage businesses, local businesses, to come on board, get our community working together, those kind of pieces. So that's what I just want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Page.
Yeah, I just want to, I'll clarify the line of questioning that came forward was born of the child's care space in the 310 ward development. Specifically, it's not so much that these don't find their place in the strategic planning, but more about the objectives that we're trying to accomplish when we go down these paths, and whether, if by not being very clear what those objectives are, we end up in implementation questions that shift some things out of the project and other things into the project. And so that ends up being like the value or the strategic priority that is unexpressed from in our goal of like mass timber buildings. Like choosing a mass timber building beside us here immediately says you cannot have public gatherings beyond the second floor. It's because you cannot have public gatherings beyond the second floor, there's no room for childcare. And I don't know what other narrowing questions that might have, but that's where I come from with this question. And when we're talking about these objectives specifically, is like, what problem are we trying to solve with each one of these projects? I think going forward, if we do clearer work there about what we're taking from the community and hearing and say, these are problems, let's solve them, how will we solve them? We won't necessarily end up in the same situation, because I think it's not so much that we won't do well economically and we won't have a great social gathering space with a library, but if different choices are made, or if we're telling the architect we need a daycare and a library, for sure that has to happen, then maybe the cafe gets shuffled out, but the daycare space is in. Because if we're clear that we're solving these problems, like COVID has severely impacted single mothers, period, more so than the fathers. And I just think we have to just be very clear with the problems we're solving when we start these consultation processes. And that's a perfect example of that. Like if this wasn't a mass timber building being considered, there would be different room for different user groups. So that's where my questions come from, around what are the objectives we are solving with these projects. And
again, we're going on, like in your strategic priorities, climate change, sustainability is your number one thing that we're hearing as staff. Yeah, that's the only reason we went to, well, one of the major reasons we went to mass timber was for that specific reason. And the daycare is not in your strategic
That's not our
priorities at all.
That's the provincial responsibility.
But we did hear it
Not ours.
through our recovery effort, and we did hear from, and we tried to engage. We did engage that group, and they came back and said, we need a building at least the minimum size that the one they're building up at Silver King, which is 2,000 to 2,500 square feet, which was really. We tried to see if it would fit in this building, and if daycare would have been at the top of your priority as in your strategic priorities, then we would have been looking at that instead of sustainability. So I think we're trying to do that, and I know we need to be flexible when other things happen during the time, just like a grant happens or this opportunity happens, we try to react to it. That's why we invited those folks to the meeting. I did ask Matthew to look at that site, and actually he did send something back and said, yeah, you could put a 2,000 square foot building on this site, not in that building, but on this site that could accommodate that. But he hasn't looked at, what are the parking impacts of that, and, it probably, you would have to pass some variances to allow that to happen, because you probably don't have the parking and the circulation and the bunch of other things. But again, he's working on, like he did, looked at our zoning. He didn't come back here with a bunch of variances he asked for. He looked at your planning documents and said, what's the DP requirements, what's the zoning, what's the parking requirements, what are all those things? And that's how that feasibility study, that was not a design of a library, it was a design of what is the maximum building we could put on this site to meet your planning goals. You know, it has to be your zoning does not allow a standalone commercial building. It doesn't allow a standalone library. Well, a library would fit on here as its own, but if it's any other type of building, you have to put residential above it. That's why when he came back, he said, here's a building with residential above it. Here's how many units you could have to meet your parking requirements and meet all those things. So you have to remember they're always going on your documents, and yeah, things will come up, but we try our best to accommodate those other uses. And in fact, in this case, he actually just sent me something, I think today, or maybe over the weekend, that said, you know, can I take that square block and fit it on this site? He can, but again, we would need direction from council if that's something in addition that you want to look at. What's that ownership? You know, there's a whole thing, and I don't think this is obviously the only site that you could put a childcare center on in Nelson. There's probably multiple sites that you could do that. And what's your role? Is it to
I think that's something we need to talk about as a council. Like, you know, are we going to facilitate, which we have been so far? As an example, the Mount St. Francis project, we made it pretty clear to Interior Health that on that site they should look at putting a childcare facility, which they've actually agreed to, that they would look at the feasibility of doing that. So is that our role, or do we take on the responsibility of the province and we're now the provider of space for childcare places, right? I don't happen to think we should be, because be careful what you ask for, because that can be a download pretty darn fast. The same thing applies to housing. Should we be the provider of housing? Should we, the municipality, be the one that drives that? No, what we've done in the past is we've helped facilitate that, and we've had a lot of success. And I think we can do the same thing with childcare facilities. But to take this project next door here and try to jam all these pieces into it, especially pieces that are not our municipal responsibility, I think is a step too far. That's my opinion. But however, that could differ around the council table. But again, I just want to caution you about the downloading opportunity that, you know, the province may see if municipalities willing to take on the role and responsibility of providing childcare spaces. That's a whole different ball game for us at the end of the day, right?
So can you just would you say our role as council is to stimulate the local economy?
Absolutely.
Through the choices we make?
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, that's one of the things we should think about.
Well, it's in your economic stimulus plan.
Yeah,
Right.
So
You made a conscious decision.
to adopt that.
So, and you know, with these projects, you know, engaging, I think it's in our, what would you call it, our procurement bylaw. We're always trying to hire local as much as possible. So I think I just keep falling back to that place that, you know, we are supporting our community through the choices we make. We can't make we can't be everything to everybody, but we can support our local community and our local businesses and our local people with their skill sets and engage them. And I think, you know, many of these projects are doing that. Plus, I think we just run up against the wall that we have these building stock and these things that are in decay and they need to be fixed up. So, like with the Hall Street Pier, it's like we can just fix it up at bare minimum, or we can take the opportunity at this moment to engage quite a few service providers of goods and services and do a really great job that'll be amazing for 50 years.
You know, we've had, like we had Sydney Black on there tonight. You know, Joy Barrett was an integral part of that whole planning. Like, this is not a project that was driven by me. It's not a project that was driven by Kevin. This is something that Public Works brought to us and said we need to fix this thing. So ideas came up. What sets us apart as a community? What sets us apart as a community? We've allowed people to walk into this room, sit at the end of that table, give us ideas. That's what sets us apart. It's not, let's go put the chicken wire back up plank off the pier, carry on as normal. It's, you know what, you've got this magnificent piece of history, and Joy went through the whole thing, and I think council was privy to that, including the Lady Bird, all part of the fabric of what made this community in the first place. When that area was developed, it was developed in the, you know, in the 1900s with people of vision. The hydro system was completed. People of vision. People of vision put our sewer, our water system in. All of that was part of what was built the culture of this table. And the culture of this table has been, for a long, long time, long before I ever got here, and hopefully long before after I'm gone, is if you got an idea, bring it to us. We'll look at it. We're not the mundane place. And that's evident by the mix of people in our community. And, you know, for me personally as the mayor, I want staff that want to be that want to see those opportunities and be that. I don't want a staff that's hiding in the corner because they're scared that council's going to, what's council going to say here? I want staff to throw something on the table. Council wants to beat the life out of it, fair enough. But we can't take away that ingenuity, vision, and vibrance that we've built in all of our departments within the municipality. You know, we've done great things in this community for well over 100 years. And this council right here can be part of the next phase, which is nothing that's ever been realized before. Not me, all of us here, every single person in this room can be part of that moving forward. Well, should we be diligent? Should we be thoughtful? Should we follow due process? Should we build a building out here that's going to put the taxpayers in a hole? I happen to think we should build a building that we sell the top half of it and it pays for everything else. And we have a free library. That's what I think. Now, that's up to council to decide if they want to do that or not. But we have an opportunity with a combination of public and private to have a brand new library, which, by the way, I don't remember us having a conversation about, do we need one? Do we need a new library? We never had that conversation. I don't recall it.
So I just want to repeat what I said before. I think it's really easy to have ideas. We see it all the time in startup culture, and try and fit a solution to a problem. And I think the more powerful orientation is to start with the most problematic problems, the deepest problems, the problems you need solved, and then figure out how to solve them. And so it's just a different way of orienting and being clear with our objectives at the start of these processes of what we're trying to solve, so that when we're making choices and narrowing the discussion, that it's narrowing along the along the pathway that achieves the objective to the greatest extent it can. And that's all I really am going with the line of questioning that happened on Thursday around that particular Hall Street project, is what is our objective and what are we trying to solve, and is that where we want to put our time and energy with? And as I said,
well, I think
so we can do great things, right? Like that's the whole goal anyway.
Yeah, what was said earlier was, like, we have had the thing presented to us. We've had these projects presented to us, and that's the time to start, you know, to deal with, you know, to work through those, and we can work through them. Now, let me give you one more piece of this puzzle, if you don't mind, right? The people that were brought to the table, there's an extended number of people that can still be invited to the table to help with the Hall Street project, right? But the key was Wood featured, right? Which was, we all talked about that, supporting local industry. We're not talking about supporting foreign industry on that project. So Wood featured. The Premier stepped up and talked about mass timber, and he wants to make that a priority in provincial government project. So we're sitting here going, yahoo! We just had a new mill built out the road that's featuring, you know, mass timber. What a way to sort of support the mill, show the world what we can do in our area. Spearhead is a leader on the planet in the work they do. They live right beside us. Why would we outsource that? Why wouldn't we use them? Same thing with drop design, and the list is endless. And I think it's important that we talked about local farmers. Well, you know, let's go to California for our tomatoes. Why wouldn't we support local farmers? Why would not apply the same jurisdiction to every other local producer in our community, regardless of who they are?
The only problem I have with it gets repeated a lot, and I just think we should hang a lantern on it for a moment, is that we have these discussions because in the previous discussions, we're told we're going to have further discussions about this, and so we can bring forward more discussion about a topic. And then we get to these discussions, and I've heard it a few times now. It's like, well, the time to have those discussions was before we had this discussion. I just don't know why that keeps happening, right? It's just very interesting that it keeps kind of being like, well, the time was in the previous meetings, but those meetings are like, well, there's going to be more meetings, and it just seems to be this.
I think you're misunderstood though, the process there. So the process is you're welcome to have these questions at any time. Okay? Let me be very clear, at any time. However, in the particular case of the library project or the pier project, he's doing the early stages of this. He's going to come back. These projects are not finalized by any means. They're going to continue to come back to council until they're finalized.
Hence the questions.
Right? Well, of course, the question about procurement, that should have been asked before we invited these folks in here to a room and have them go through a process of deciding do they want to participate in the project. That was the time to talk about procurement. Now, if we want to deal with procurement and we want to do what we would normally do and potentially outsource all of that, we need some clarity on that. If we want mass timber coming out of Penticton, Ontario, maybe Manitoba, then we should outsource that. If we want somebody other than Spearhead design the whatever Matthew's put forward for the decking and the Ladybird, then we need to know that. We as a council, we as a staff, we need to know that. So now is the time to say, let's get this off the table, let's outsource this stuff or not. Let's put it out to open market.
The intention of the line of questioning around the corporate sponsorship policy is not should we or should we not procure it from a local supplier, but more when there's an in-kind investment being made in a project, how do we quantify that investment and put it in line with other kinds of investment? And what kind of recognition does that group, do we allow that group to have as part of the project? Because it's a public realm project. They're contributing essentially a value to it, and there's some dollar figure that could be assigned to that value. And other partners may not be invited into the process to provide or offer the value they can provide. And that's what that intention in that line of questioning is like, what is that policy in terms, and do we even have that policy inside of our procurement documents on how we track, know, and then recognize in an appropriate fashion an in-kind investment that we wouldn't necessarily get. And there's just been a couple cases of that, and I'm wondering, like, if there's a different mayor and council, do they have access to that preferred kind of pricing, and is that appropriate that sometimes it goes with the shift of the politics? And I'm just trying to think of the corner cases of how we have a robust procurement policy that is getting us the best value for dollar term after term after term, right? Like, that's where I'm going. That's where I went with that.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying there. And I think if there's other people out there you think should be brought to the table, by all means, bring them to the table. You know, we can use all the help we can get, you know, to put this in. And it can come in any form. And I agree with you. And I sat in there with a number of the people that want to participate, and I was very clear with them that we realize that there's value for you in doing this project because it's going to be a feature piece of architecture based on what Michael had brought to us at that particular point in time, that there's value in it to them. They can use it as a showpiece for their business. So there's got to be value there. It's like a sponsorship or whatever.
Rick Hesson.
So we'd expect that.
Sarah, can you clarify what the motion is that's on the table?
There's no motion.
There's nothing
Just
on
for
there.
information. Yeah.
No.
There's an update on this.
Yeah, but there's the options here are to receive the information or provide further direction to staff. Can I move that we just receive this information from staff?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would, if I may have a final note.
Yeah.
Partner at the table, KCDS. I'd love to see a strong labor component to some of these projects in terms of apprenticeship training, maybe Selkirk. How can we use these as an opportunity for younger trades, more so than maybe would be done normally, to get their hands into a project like this and get the lifetime experience of working at the front of these lines as opposed to not. So I'd love to see KCDS approached as a partner.
Well, I've worked in the trades my whole life. And I can tell you the quickest way to success for a tradesperson is to create employment for them. create construction projects, and they get hired, they go into the construction project and they get their time in, and that's how they get their ticket. They don't get their ticket by doing piecemeal projects all over Hell's Half Acre. If you roll out consistent construction projects in your community, carpenters have time to get their 3-year, 4-year apprenticeship, their red seal, and then they can move on in their own life if they wish. So the opportunity comes with work. It doesn't come with less work, it comes with more work.
No, I do think though that what Councillor Page was referring to was the program that we had down at the railway station. I think that, and
Oh, I
perhaps.
see what you're saying.
Yeah, and I do think that there was a strong labor component of that, and I think that that's something that we do want to be striving for, that we're not just, we're looking for business opportunities, but also labor and training opportunities. But I also would like to second Councillor Lochtenberg's motion.
Thank you.
Bedtime's
Okay,
coming
any
up,
further
so.
questions or comments?
I assume we're
Carry
business
on.
as usual, we're trying to meet a grant deadline by October 1st. This is the final stages to, it's with a cost consultant to try to cost this
Yeah.
project. And
I think the only person that was trying, that we have received an email, which is, I believe, why this is on the table right now, saying that there was going to be stoppage of all of this work, where I think that we've just unanimously passed that we want this work to keep going, so I.
Good, and that's what we need to know, because it didn't appear that way the last meeting. There was a lot of confusion over,
We
in
could
my
have had a
opinion.
motion.
Anyway. So, pardon?
I would have preferred us to have a motion at our last meeting to push that kind of work. It was so,
I do want to acknowledge the work that went into this agenda piece.
yes.
I actually thought we were going to cover piece by piece, but it is getting very late. But I want to acknowledge that I was very happy to see all this laid out. So it's not, I hope, Kevin, you don't feel like it went to waste. I think this is great to have it really laid out in point form with the council decisions. So thank you for that work.
Okay, we have a mover and a seconder.
Yeah.
Any further comments?
Yeah, as the mover, I would encourage Councillor Page to either do a notice of motion or work with staff to make an update to the procurement bylaw. I think that's a great idea, but in this case, I think that's a big question and it should be left for a future date.
I would wait for a response to my email first on what we have. I don't know what we have in place now.
Okay.
So,
Okay, all in favor? Your hand up there, Janice, or not? Okay, sorry, I couldn't see you behind the computer.
Hand's getting heavy.
Hands getting lazy there. Thank you. All right, next is information items.
I did have a question about this.
Yeah.
Just at the accounts payable listing, 8.4 million. So I did go through this and there was a payout of 4.7 million to the regional district?
taxes.
Taxes, okay. Great. I just wanted a point of clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, and to be clear, in most cases, the number would have been a lot bigger going out. But because the province has said to municipalities they can hold on to the school tax portion until December, so otherwise, Council, you would have seen not only that payment to the regional district, but you would have also seen the payments for early, actually in July, for the school tax as well. Big numbers, but yeah, good thing to see, be looking at.
Thank you very much.
Which is effectively the amount of taxes that is being collected in the city of Nelson for regional district services. That's 4.7 million.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from the reports? And the Rusty Moose is gone, I noticed.
Didn't see it there.
Councillor Rockland.
There's quite a list of people receiving $125. If anybody looks at this, I'm assuming that's for the Nest Lab.
Food
No,
cycler.
food cycler.
Food cycler.
Oh, it was food cyclers. Thank you.
Anything else? Councillor Anderson?
I just wanted to say that I was happy to see that we only had one Amazon purchase and lots and lots of money going out locally to lots of different local businesses. So,
Local, absolutely.
yes.
Yes.
Thank you. move a seat, somebody, please? Councillor Anderson, Councillor Woodward, all in favour? Carried, thanks very much. Late items.
So my late item is the Columbia Basin Trust has released their 2-year strategic priorities, and they are requesting feedback. So I have personally given feedback. I've also encouraged other people to personally provide feedback. But I would like to propose that we provide feedback as a council, just through a simple letter to their board of directors. Looking through the strategic plan, there was one component that I found to be glaring in its absence, and that was climate change. There was nothing about climate change adaptation, mitigation, resilience. Climate change wasn't covered at all, and as council's #1 strategic priority, I think it's imperative that we communicate that to the Columbia Basin Trust, because moving forward, a lot of the projects that we're going to want to complete and going to have to complete are going to have a strong climate change component, if not all of them, whether that's adaptation or mitigation, resilience. So I would like to move the motion. I believe staff does have the language. I need to pull that up right now. Yes, if staff could read it, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
The proposed resolution from Councillor Anderson is that the mayor, on behalf of council, write a letter to the board of directors of the Columbia Basin Trust regarding their draft strategic plan and urge them to add climate change as a top strategic priority.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any further comments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. So how does I'm assuming because it's the CDT, they must do a travel around show
Yeah, they did it via Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Most of it this time.
But they must have input from
Yeah.
obviously from the basin.
Yeah.
Well,
And
they're collecting that now.
much like we do.
Till Friday.
Yeah, it's pretty well finished on the 11th, is it?
Yeah.
The 11th it stops.
So that information that we got that somebody brought last meeting about their strategic priorities, and the fact that you're bringing this up and it wasn't on there. So they didn't hear it?
So they had a draft, it was a draft plan.
Draft, yeah.
And then they had a period of time which ends on the 11th for the public to add anything more to that draft plan. And so
So as far as the draft plan goes, they haven't heard that yet, as that hasn't been a priority, obviously. Okay, and you're trying to.
or they've chosen to, because they did have environmental restoration.
Yeah, I saw that.
And
And food security.
Food security.
food security
Local
and housing.
agriculture.
I mean, they had some great things on there, but there
yeah.
was absolutely no mention of climate change mitigation or adaptation, which, like for us, we're doing that all the time. We have a climate change coordinator. Like, we're involved in that as a city, and so are other cities, municipalities, and regional district.
Talk about downloading. Talk about downloading climate change. Like.
Yeah, I think, I think it's worth keeping in mind. I have no problem with us writing to them. It's worth keeping in mind, this is what Basin residents have said. And, like, if we don't like what they said, we can't force them to say something else, right?
No.
And now, I was on one of the calls, and I think there was 15 other people on there. It didn't even hit the radar. People were more concerned about their jobs, the economy, how they're going to get through COVID. Was the airport going to open up? It was just it was very meat and potatoes when it came to,
Climate change is the new meat and potatoes.
No, I'm not suggesting it, but I'm just saying people were, they're pulling back to what they're comfortable with, and they're saying, okay, I need my job. That's really that's how the conversation went. Nobody on the call raised climate change. Nobody. You go, Talcott. Go ahead, Rick, and then Keith, sorry.
Yeah, so this, as Councillor Woodward was saying, I believe this is our opportunity to offer feedback.
Oh,
So,
fair enough.
yeah,
Just,
we don't-
I didn't know how they came about that, that's all.
Yeah, so they're open for feedback, absolutely.
Yeah, no problem.
I would just regale everyone with a story from my line of work. One of the things that often happens, I notice it happens all the time. People come in and they tell me what's wrong with their workflow, why they can't do something. They express a frustration, sometimes quite a frustration, about something that's really top of mind and important to their day-to-day lives. But having that expertise level of the technology they're bringing forward ends up, you have to digest that and point out the strategic things they need to do to get past those problems that they're having in the first place, which them describing that they can't print or run a program or it's really slow doesn't inform us or inform themselves on how they would solve that problem, right? And so I think when people are, especially during a time when there's limited engagement opportunities, they're expressing the symptoms of what they're having problems with, but they don't know the solutions. And so I think this is an opportunity to say, going forward as we deal with the long-term vibrancy and economic potential of our economy and for the basin residents, like dealing with climate change and expressly in the strategic plan is dealing with those same expressed problems of future residents in 10, 15, 20 years. So I think us having sat here and digested a lot of this information, we have to be able to sit down and hear what our residents are telling us and what's going to impact those same problems in the future, and be able to articulate that to like the basin and say, you know, you need to put this up front because it will be a strategic initiative that supports solving those problems people will have in 20 years.
Yeah, and it's a 2-year plan, by the way. It's not, it's a short-term plan that was pulled together because of the whole COVID thing and everything else. So it's not going to set direction for them for the next 50 years, that's for sure.
Sure.
I would just suggest you might want to be a little bit more specific, because I would think they would say, you know, food security is part of
Yeah,
climate
and if you look on the website, you'll see a list of things they're doing.
Restoration.
Restoration is part of climate change. You know, what are you asking for? Is that for planning for mitigation, wildfire, for flooding, for what are you actually asking for?
On their website, you can see their current commitment to environmental projects. So on their web, it's not like they've walked away from those. So Councillor Woodward, you had your hand up, and then Councillor Locke.
I would just say maybe a clarification that we could say, you know, climate change adaptation mitigation such as wildfire mitigation or flood readiness. Like, you know, those two pieces affect us all the time every year now. So that could just be a specific. I mean, that's work. You know, doing wildfire mitigation and flood readiness is job creation too.
Supporting climate change planning in other municipalities that may not have access to grant funding, or been awarded grant funding.
I could put forward a specific resolution that does exactly what Councillor Page is saying, which is the Climate Solutions Center. The idea being that we need to solve this this challenge in a really innovative way. We don't have all the answers, but we do know that we don't have the capacity, as do a lot of other rural communities around us don't have the capacity. So we could say something related to that. We've got the letter ready to go. I can share with all of you.
Asking them to create this thing?
Yeah, to support the development. I hear what you're saying about the specifics of it. I did get a sense of that, and I talked to a few people. They're in some sense almost beyond climate change. They're into the details now. And it is kind of a miss that the language isn't there. So I would even just say the letter itself would do something. So I'm not saying that. But I hear what the CAO is saying about like offering some specifics, like really concrete specifics, could be the way to go on this.
I mean, if we want to go through concrete specifics, I mean, I think you can look at what Jesse said in terms of, you know, our adaptation pieces are going to be, you know, wildfire, flood. When we look at our mitigation pieces, it's going to be transportation and homes and buildings. So I mean, we can be specific about that if that's what council wants.
I mean, just a word or two.
Yeah, you can draft that up, Kevin, and we can circulate it.
Yeah, I
and
just think,
try and make it,
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be in the resolution. I think that staff has the capacity to include that within the letter.
Okay. All right, any further conversation on that? Hearing none, all in favor? Carried, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Next, last but not least.
So I have a resolution to put forward on Cottonwood Lake, which I've shared with all of you.
Did you write it out already?
Yep,
Good.
shared it with staff and emailed everyone. So I can go ahead and read it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Whereas the Cottonwood Lake Preservation Society has an impending funding deadline and are short of their interim funding requirement, and whereas the protection of Cottonwood Lake and the forest upslope are important to the well-being of city residents, including but not limited to providing flood protection along Cottonwood Creek and into Railtown, be it resolved that the City of Nelson contribute $35,000 to the Cottonwood Lake Preservation Society, with the condition that if the land purchase deal is not completed, that the total amount be returned to the city.
I'll second.
So I'm happy to just say one thing to it, that this is the vote that will decide whether this happens or not, given the time frame. So we do at this table, not to put too fine a point on it, but it's worth noting that if we don't pass this, it won't happen. The deal will fall through. Second, that there is a vital and necessary interest for the city to participate. We've been talking a lot in the last year about green infrastructure, and although I could list off 10 reasons why I think this is important to protect, I can focus just on that alone. It would make $35,000 contribution to the city more than pay for itself over the long term in terms of flood protection in Railtown, let alone Cottonwood Creek and beyond. There's also fire protection potential. There's landslide potential. All of that is there, but just on protecting Railtown alone, I think this is a really smart investment for the city to make. Thank you.
So,
Councilor Woodward.
thank you. So when this whole thing first happened, well, it was right when we got elected, so it was somewhere around October, November of 2018. There was a couple of meetings that happened, community meetings, where they had brought in a bunch of local scientists, what were they called? Landscape or geotechnical scientists, and they were saying there is a real threat with if you shave off that mountain above where the snow comes down on the mountainside and then melts into Cottonwood Lake, then comes down Cottonwood Creek. If you remove the forest from that, so right now there will be, if we don't pass this and it is logged, there'll be about 150 meters of forest, and then it'll be logging. And what will happen, snow will come down. If we have a heavy snow year, that melt will happen really fast, come pouring through the 150 meters of forest into Cottonwood Lake and firing down into our town. So there is a real, concrete concern here for what will happen if we have a huge snowfall and a fast melt to Rosemont, down near Cottonwood Creek Park, moving past the Ford dealership down. And I think for me, what really got me was Cottonwood Creek goes right by our public works. So if we had a major flood event, we could have a situation where public works might get cut off from the rest of the city. And it has risen very high there in past years. So my main concern is quick flood in the spring could cause a lot of damage in the town. So, and that was corroborated by those scientists that were at a couple of those meetings.
Councillor Page and then Councillor Renwick.
My first set of questions is not about any of that, because we've had those discussions. My questions revolve around the capacity for the society to do the fundraising, because we've gotten this after the first deadline, and what milestones going forward need to be hit, and do we have faith that though, like I'm understanding that once we hit this, there's other milestones to continue on to address the very real concern that you've expressed there, Councillor Woodward. But in order to achieve that, there is still more work ahead of us to get to. And so I'm wondering, did we receive anything from the society in terms of what happened with the fundraising and how much further they need to go? And is there going to be another ask in 6 months with another deadline? Like I have problems with the moral hazard of providing this when the time has already been provided. And I understand that COVID is one of those throw it up in the air kind of moments, but I'm just, you know, I'm looking for the guy to knock on my door, send me a postcard asking for $50.
And you will. As the mover of the main motion, I'll just respond to that. The next deadline is December. The only other deadline is December, where the entire amount has to be completed. The risk to the city, fair point, if that money that we put up was then gone, I would take your point and say, well, that's something we need more information about. But if the money's not raised, then the city's not out anymore.
What's the next deadline for how much?
December.
700 grand.
No, well, it'll be 500.
No, the total price is 700 grand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we gotta have 700 grand by December.
Yes, 700 grand by December. That includes the 180 that they would have here. But again, my point is kind of irrelevant to this question because we're not risking anything. If they don't meet their funding deadline by December, the city hasn't risked anything. What we do guarantee, if we don't pass this motion, that it will fail. At least you've bought them the chance to make it to December, given that they had a really, I think, sound plan that got dramatically interrupted by COVID. They started by putting the deal in place. They recruited the fundraising team. They were going after grant funding. Grant, as many of you may know, a lot of these grant organizations, if not all of them, sealed off new intake with COVID. So their first part of a very smart plan was interrupted. You will, if we pass this, you can expect that they will be coming to you asking for more than $50 once this happens. They do have people who have expressed an interest in supporting them if this passes. But if the city doesn't step up at this critical moment, it does send a signal to the community, to other potential funders, that it's not a priority. And I would argue that that's really the question. Is this a priority? Is it priority worth $35,000 given the other things that we've invested in? That the original price when we were originally debating this was 20 times that. No, 10 times that, 20 times that. So we've got a dramatically reduced contribution that's being asked of us to, and a dramatically reduced
Could
risk.
I ask you a question?
Sure.
If there's people out there, as you claim, that are willing, why aren't they stepping up?
They are.
But
They are.
then
And
why
keep in mind,
why do we need 35 grand?
well, 35 grand is nothing compared to the whole price. Like, the question could be turned back to us, why is the city not coming up with 350 grand? Given the risk to the city. Think about it. From this perspective, and I've heard this argument, this is used by 90% of this park is used by 90% of the people using this park are Nelson residents, and this is increasing with COVID. You have school groups in there now. You have over and over again this park is being used as a place to do outdoor education given the COVID restraints. So then there's the issue of downstream consequences if we don't, especially over 30, 60, 80-year time horizons. When you're talking about infrastructure, gray infrastructure or green infrastructure, you're talking about 60-year, 80-year planning. What can happen in that 80 years, as Councillor Woodward have said, could be a once in a 100-year, once in 300-year flood. That $35,000 will look like nothing compared to the cost of a flood in Railtown.
Thank you. Councillor Renwick.
I guess my issue, and I had quite a chat with Bruce Morrison this morning, is that, you know, they're on this timeline, and they're a third short on 180 grand and hoping to get to 700,000. And I don't know if you guys have ever done any fundraising, but 700 grand is a phenomenally huge number for an area or a city like Nelson. And I'm going to challenge you, Rick, on your 90% of people that use Cottonwood Lake, because how do we know that? We know that because we're counting numbers. The school kids that are going up there, are they all living in Nelson, or are there some RD kids going up there? Like, you know, I'm sorry, I don't buy that it's all on us. And the other thing is, yeah, if these people have this money, then why haven't they plunked it down? And they haven't. And there is a caveat there for them that if you want to make a large contribution, and I'm not talking about $1,000 or $2,000 or $2,500, I'm talking about a large contribution, that they will ink a deal with you and you will get most of it back. And fair enough. So, you know, if you put 10 grand down, you might get 9 grand back, and $1,000 goes into maintaining Cottonwood Park. I don't know. Part of me wants to say that if we do this now and they get close to the 700 grand, they're going to come back again. And I'm probably speaking out of turn here, but I'd rather say, you know what, when they need 35 grand on December the 30th, because they're that much short, I'd rather step up then and say, here's where we're in. But
and again, as the move of the main motion to respond to that, I have raised money many times for nonprofits and for private companies, millions in fact. And
well,
what you've said,
you don't have it now.
Well, I haven't been involved in the fundraising.
Well, maybe you should be.
And I probably will. I've specifically stayed out of this from the beginning. I got involved at the beginning as a way of sort of supporting them as what I saw was a vital and necessary project for the city, and then stayed away. But I'm raising that to answer the question, or to make the point that you're exactly right. What you would rather do, wait to the end, wait to the 11th hour and come in with $35,000 is exactly how you raise the money. That was the easiest money to raise is the last money. The last 200,000 is way easier than the first 200,000. People want to be heroes at the end. There's so many people just on the sidelines waiting to see what happens. Who else is getting involved? What's the baseline? What's going to make me look good if everybody's contributing 20, 30,000 and I come in with $500, I'm going to look like a chump. All of those things are at play. And so these guys, community volunteers who in some cases stepping up to do something that the city has some stake in, they're not full-time. You know, Bruce, you know, these guys are volunteers with very little fundraising experience. So I agree with you. The last money is the easiest money, and I think it's going to be tough over the next 3 months. But again, the city's not at risk. But I think if we give them the chance, they may do it. If we vote this down now, they have no chance. So we won't see either way.
Janice, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment just in terms of the fact that, you know, the city of Nelson is already, this isn't like we're coming and we're talking about $35,000. City of Nelson has already made a commitment in terms of the fact that we've signed off on our portion of a $255,000 loan. And the last time I looked at the city of Nelson within the regional district park service, we pay about 50% of that amount. So we will already have been going to the citizens of Nelson over the next number of years to pay off about 125, which would be our portion of the 250. So, you know, the city of Nelson, I think we need to be clear, the city of Nelson has already made a commitment to Cottonwood. And I have to just sort of support some of the things that Councillor Page and Councillor Renwick have already said, and in regards to this project in terms of, you know, since that has happened, since the regional district, of which we are a partner, has bought the 21 hectares around the lake, I've basically heard very little about the Cottonwood Preservation Society going forward with their fundraising to purchase any more of the lands around the lake. A couple things come to my mind is that I appreciate that, Councillor, that you have a close relationship. You might not be involved directly with this group, but you do know some of the primary people in this group, and I'm still trying to figure out. I still haven't seen a written request, except for the fact that you've brought this motion forward on a piece of letterhead or anything coming from the Cottonwood Preservation Society asking the City of Nelson for some additional money. I would have expected that I would have gotten a letter, that we would have at a minimum have gotten a letter from the society asking for this money. I too have had a conversation with Bruce Morrison, knowing that they're missing a third, they're missing $60,000, whether or not he would confirm whether or not they're asking us for 35, who's pitching in the other 25. He said that for, you know, privacy reasons, he couldn't say who those people were. I'm sort of thinking if they were also people in the public purse, like he was asking the regional directors for more money, that should be something that's actually public. But I understand the process because I too have been involved with fundraising over the years, and I'm unclear as to why that if we're not there for $35,000, why we are assuring that it's going to fail, because Councillor Renwick brought up the point that if there's all these people sitting in the wings waiting to then raise the other missing, you know, $400,000, $500,000 that isn't on the table yet, you know, where are those people with that money? Having done fundraising, having been involved with trying to raise money for a CAT scan at the hospital, and yes, there's some glory in being the last guy to throw in the money. There's a lot of glory. You can talk about your fundraising and the millions that you've raised. There's a lot of glory in being the guy that throws in the first 50,000, as much as the last 50,000. And I would much sooner come back on a project of $700,000 than if they were a few pennies short at the far end. That feeling confident that the residents of the City of Nelson would be comfortable with spending a little bit more money to protect this area. But you know, we've already made, I mean, let's not forget, we have already made a significant contribution to ensuring trees stay standing. And then I'm sorry, I'm just going to say this. When you start talking about a 40 and 60 year event, yes, those can happen. I'm sure that they probably will happen because somehow we're way behind on doing anything about climate change and adaptation and mitigation. But at the same time is that I know, having watched the W regrow, that in 25 to 30 years, that if he logged it right down to the bare bones, has a very good chance of being repopulated. They never reforested the clear cut that private loggers made on the side of the hill here in Nelson. And if you weren't here when they did it, you wouldn't know where it is now. And it's been about 25 years, and that clear cut has grown back in. That was just above the City of Nelson. That had a lot of hue and cry at the time that it, I mean, that was the W, like, oh, we've got the aliens can know where the Walmart store is. I mean, it was an ongoing joke. But trees grow back. So I would imagine that in 60 years, that would be reforested if Mr. Jenks was to clear cut that area. So that's just a little bit of a side note, because I sometimes fear, I almost feel like I'm supposed to have this fear about what's going to happen, and I'm a person, I'm sorry, I can't live in fear, but I can live, you know, this money is an issue for me. I know that you gave me a call on the weekend to ask me my position. My position stays unchanged. I cannot support this $35,000 ask.
So, in response to, through the chair, the issue of if they came at the end, it would be a different story. In effect, that's what this is, because they're not asking for the money now. if they could say, this could be framed differently, they could say, if we get to the end and there's $35,000 missing, would the city be good for that 35? That would have the same material effect as if we passed this motion today. So we could be the last 35. So you could even, I'm not suggesting this, and this could be an amendment that we'd have to vote on, but you could put this amendment to this to say that we're the last 35 to be raised. I would caution against that. And I would caution against it because of the signal it sets to people and like Director Smith, like David Off and Popoff and people, Newell, who are outside, further removed, who've contributed. We would be effectively matching their contribution. I can tell you that now. We've had a number of directors step up and make a commitment to this purchase over and above what they've made from their discretionary funding already. So what we're saying is, Oat and Pass Creek, you've got no stake in this at all, and yet you realize that this is something, to be a good regional partner, this is something that I think we should do. They're contributing, and then we say, no, we're not. That's a tough signal to send to anybody.
I'm going to stop you there, Councillor. Yeah, I think you have a fair kick at the cat as far as the deadline goes and but on that note, for me, personally, all I see here is a request. I see no budget. I hear somebody saying it's 700,000, somebody else saying it's 450,000. I don't know. Nobody knows that. Like, we had the Eco Society here, we turned them down, basically for the same reason. They couldn't come forward with a budget to run the market, and when they did, they just walked away from it with the money they were allocated with. So I think I don't know. Like, what I'm saying to you is, first of all, I don't see any evidence that any director's contributing. I don't see a budget to tell me.
Forward that information to you right now. I can also say that we did get a letter, a specific letter for the 35. So it's not like I'm bringing this forward. We have a letter from the society on letterhead asking for this 35. So
I'm sorry, I don't have that. I've never received that.
Left on our desk.
You did at the last meeting, sorry. It was distributed.
It was an email
Yeah.
In an email.
From Bruce.
from Bruce.
Yeah. So
The challenge we have, as staff, I thought they would have provided some financial
I mean,
information.
there's nothing here. Like, this is like a piece of paper, it's just,
Like, I was expecting, here's
I mean,
what
there's,
the deal is, like, do they have to write a check on whatever
No.
date this is? Do they
they don't.
have to,
we have nothing.
somehow they raise this money? Or?
I'm sorry, but this,
On the-
to me, this like, I mean, there's nothing to base the decision on here, other than we want $35,000, we give it back to you. If this doesn't work, what is this? Is it, like, is there options being explored here? As an example, has anyone explored the opportunity of potentially running that as a community forest? And they get all their money back and
You'll
make
have-
money through perpetuity.
And you'll have that opportunity come tomorrow. You won't have that opportunity. If this deal ends, then it's over. You'll have 2 months to make any recommendation.
But
to the
that
society
process,
that you-
like, that's not being even talked about. And like, let me just give you an example of what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I'm hearing this is the first step in a second piece of property down below or above the Nordic ski hill. Right.
We're talking only about.
Well, we
Cottonwood.
heard that from
And
the
if
first
they-
time
if
around.
they do come back-
Councillor, we heard that the first time around too. This was the only piece we wanted was around the lake. And then the group decided, okay, we're gonna go beyond that. And like, I just wanna see some meat on the bones here, and I'm not seeing that. So let me talk to you again about fundraising. A community commitment to fundraising. I was part of several of them. I'll name 2 of them, the CT scan and the pool. Kids collected bottles. Kids walked to Castlegar. Families walked to Castlegar. Families had hot dog sales in their neighborhoods. That's fundraising. I haven't seen that effort from this group here.
But I have. They
well,
have done that. They have been doing. They
am
have
I
had
the-
kids
like,
doing all of these
Am
things.
I the invisible man here in Nelson?
You might be. This has been an active process, and again, the merits of it aren't on. We don't decide the merits on this based on who's fundraising or not. how much time they have, how much experience they have fundraising. The simple question is,
Rick,
does the
let's-
city of Nelson
Councillor,
have
let's see a budget
stake?
here. We haven't seen it, but we were asking somebody to buy, offering us a pig and a poke. Give us $35,000. If it doesn't work, we'll give it back to you. There's no budget, there's no timeline. I don't know what they are. I don't know what the timelines are. I don't know what the whole budget is. And we cut back on pay increases, freezing our hiring within the municipality. We've cut back to the bone, 0% tax increase. And people seem to think they can waltz through this door here and ask you for $35,000 just for the hell of it.
But again,
Like, honest to God, if somebody had time to write this motion, which you had,
yeah.
the least they could have done was furnished you, help you make your case by giving you the budget, timelines, and everything else. Nobody had the common sense to put that together. To me, it's flawed.
I think all of them have believed they've had and been providing information to the city, been providing it.
Councillor, we've got a wharf down there we'll sell you.
Including making
We've got a bridge
themselves
for sale.
available to each one of us. They've made themselves available for a conversation. But again, I would stress, this is not about, we're not making a decision on the ability of these guys to fundraise or their experience in fundraising. We're making it on, is there a vital interest to the city of Nelson? Is $35,000 a good investment in protecting ourselves from future floods? Oh, and beyond, but just keeping it on that.
Can you please tell me what is the total cost of the project?
It's over 700,000.
700,000. And then what do they have today?
If this happens, if they
No, what do they have today?
140.
140,000.
Was the last thing
But
I
it's
got from Bruce.
again, it's pretty loose because we've got verbal commitments. For example, we've got, and I can share the email with you. We've got verbal commitments from area directors with an additional 15.5 from their discretionary. That's on top of what they've already made.
So we would get
that
50,000,
wouldn't-
you would get 50,000 of everybody, if everybody jumped in that said they're jumping in, they haven't committed yet, said you'd have 50,000 of 750,000, you're getting 50,000 to help you up that little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly the whole point of this is we as a city are making a contribution to something that may not happen. But if it doesn't happen, we, unlike potentially a few others who got in early, don't have the opportunity. We have the opportunity to get all of our money back. And so the risk is essentially zero. It all comes down to, is this worth saving? Yes or no? For $35,000, is it worth saving? Yes or no? It's as simple as that. Because if you say $35,000, it should be cut. Like, cut it. It's not worth $35,000. Then fine. That's the point you can make. But if you say it is worth $35,000, and you have some caveats, all of those caveats are addressed. They're all there. There's nothing. There's no additional risk here. It's a yes or no. $35,000 to save it or not? Is it worth
Councillor
it?
Page.
Thank you. I have two main problems, and they have nothing to. The wildfire thing. Wildfire could rip through there, and you'd still be in a flood situation. Yeah. So I think floating that fear up is a problem in terms of you are not necessarily protecting from that fear with this money. It's not a one-to-one. I have a problem with the signals that might be going on with the society or the volunteers in general, simply because I do not see that society presenting us with budgets, giving us a timeline, coming to us before the deadline of August 31st. I don't see that capacity coming forward saying, I have an adversarial negotiator that I'm working with who has given me a timeline, and I have to lose sleep over how I'm going to drag that money into the bank account. And there's still another 3 months left to go, and a much bigger amount of money left to go. And we have a lot of, like, you're speaking that you're not associated with it, but we don't have them speaking. We have you speaking.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, a very big problem in terms of if we give the 3,500 or 35,000 and I hear, okay, yeah, potentially we'll just get it back, there's no risk, and that's somewhat persuasive, but when we go over the next 3 months, if we get to that side of it, I want to hear from these people. I want to hear from these people ahead of time.
But we're not gonna get the chance
You're
if
not
we
gonna
don't
get
do
the
it right
chance.
now.
I hear you, but I do not want to say yes to something like this and set the example that, like, yeah, sure, you just throw it in last minute after the deadline and hand it in, and I'll grade you and give you, you know, like, there's a process that needs to be followed. We need to hear from the society, and they need to. They have obligations under the Societies Act to speak in a particular way. You're not part of the society. You don't have those obligations.
Number two things. Number one is that we sent them the signal very clearly not to come here. That was very clear that this city sent that signal. We said, go and raise it in the community. And they did. They took on that mission. They respected the signal that we sent them. Now they're up to the deadline and they're like, guys, with COVID, this is where we are. So is it worth you, Councillor Page, is it worth to this table saving for $35,000? If it's not, then just say it. You say it's not worth $35,000, it's fine.
Who are they talking to?
All of us. They have made themselves.
We pushed them back? Have you told them not to come?
Nobody said a word to me.
They have
Who's
made
telling them not
themselves.
to come?
Have you received an email, phone call, text from them?
A phone call over the weekend before a meeting like that, I thought was just for myself inappropriate, and I didn't think that was
take the call. So you
I didn't get a
refused to
phone call.
hear-
I got a text message. No, but through the table at the council in front of the public, not a weekend to go to row canoe up at the lake. Like that's out of the public eye. That discussion isn't happening here. We're not sharing that discussion. Like it just.
Well, then
it's
what I
just
would
lobbying.
recommend, you buy the time here to then give them that instruction, because what you could have done is reply to them and say, hey, it's not appropriate for you to make this offer. Come to a meeting.
Okay, so
But who's talking to them that gives them the impression this late item shouldn't come to this table? Like
They've reached out to all of us. The fact that I picked up the phone.
they've reached out to staff.
never heard a word. Me,
Reach out to the city hall.
not a word. You'd almost think, like, lots of people phone me, believe me. In fact, in the closed meeting, I'm going to tell you a few of them when we're done, that actually have a real project that they can actually fund, have phoned me. I've never heard one word from the Cottonwood Lake Society.
The Cottonwood Lake Society organized an event at the beginning that has been. Has there been an event that's been that well received? Like 400 people, and they couldn't. They had to leave people out in the parking lot.
$1,000 a piece, and they'd been halfway there to their goal. That's
Well,
a real
then
commitment.
this is the signal we should have sent to them a year ago. Rather than say, you guys have the responsibility to do this. This is something in the city's vital interest. But you guys go take care
No,
of it.
you're mistaken. I'm sorry, Councillor, you're mistaken. We didn't send them off to raise more money to buy another piece of land.
Bought the land.
We never did that. That was never part of what we did. They decided to go off and raise more money and buy another piece of land. We committed to the piece that we were asked to commit to.
We were asked to commit to the whole thing, and we said we're going to take option A, which is the sliver
Exactly. There
along,
was
along the lake.
exactly.
So
We
now
chose
we're
that
at this point where we're saying, do we want to protect that? We risk what we've purchased. So do we put $35,000 to protect an investment that we've already made, or not? I mean, it's a simple. Really, like, we can talk about them and their process. We should definitely, if we do this, have them in and instruct them on how to do this better.
I'm
But
sorry,
is it $35,000? Is it worth protecting for $35,000?
I'm sorry.
Simple as that.
I'm going to call the question. Because, and without a budget, without knowing what the numbers are, without seeing a plan for raising the rest of the money, we're in a really tough position, because we're saying to this community, we cannot afford to do a lot of the stuff you're asking us to do, like cut the boulevards, plant additional flower, and on and on and on. We've done it all here for the last several months, and now we're going to take a group that wants $35,000, and maybe there's 4 other regional district directors going to contribute. We haven't seen that. Going to contribute to it. It still only comes up to $50,000 for a $480,000 shortfall, and we've been asked that if we don't come to the table, this is going to collapse. I think that's unfair, and it's disrespectful to this council.
It's also just
So I'm going to call the question. All in favour?
I want to hear the question again.
The question is, whereas Cottonwood Lake Preservation Society has implemented funding sorry, can you read it? I can't read the small print.
Happy to, Mayor.
Yeah.
Whereas the Cottonwood Lake Preservation Society has an impending funding deadline and are short of their interim funding requirement, and whereas the protection of Cottonwood Lake and the forest upslope are important to the well-being of city residents, therefore be it resolved that the City of Nelson contribute $35,000 to the Cottonwood Lake Preservation Society with the condition that if the land purchase deal is not completed, that the total amount be returned to the city.
Can I amend that? Can we change contribute to loan?
I don't think they would be able to.
They get the money.
Yeah, but how would they pay that back?
They have 400,000 more dollars they have to get. What's 3,500? 35,000. Sorry.
Does that meet the interim requirement?
I don't think so. So what I would recommend, if that, and I'm not saying I'm gonna vote for the amendment, but what I would recommend doing with the amendment is saying, if they raise more than the amount, then we're first in line to get it back. So it's a loan if they raise more than 35. And then we as a
Wait,
more
It's
than
already in there.
if there's an additional 35 that they raise, so it's a loan after the
they can default on the
land has
loan,
been purchased.
but-
It's a loan after the land has been purchased. I think that would count. Because what Jenks wants to know is this a done deal? So for example, if you said if it's a loan, the terms could be that we pull it back if we don't like something at prior to the purchase. You could say $35,000 towards the purchase with the expectation that they're going to pay it back. It's not a requirement.
Oh, it should be, okay.
Well, I'm asking if we have a seconder for it being a loan. Because I think, first off, the society needs to be coming through those front doors to the second floor and bringing these requests to staff, so that there isn't any confusion of what we do and do not entertain. And I will entertain bridging this with a loan. And now you have $35,000 more you need to raise. So, and I don't have anyone from the society here speaking on behalf of the society. So,
Well, we can easily reach them.
it is not my job to take that out of the public eye and call them behind the scenes and figure out what they need.
You don't
They
have
need-
to. You can call them in the public eye. You can call them right now.
I'm not gonna call.
Well, then you're asking a question out of the blue. Who's going to answer that except these guys? So just
Yeah,
call
but
them and
I
ask.
think, sorry, Councillor, I'm sorry, but from my perspective, I think you're way outside your parameters here, as city councillor. You're clearly lobbying for this group beyond what I've seen around this table in most cases.
I'll say that I think this is the city's responsibility, and I said that at the beginning, that
No,
it's
that's-
not, we shouldn't be offloading our responsibilities onto volunteers in
You
the
shouldn't
city.
take it on.
The fact that they did, I think now it's the least we can do is support them at a fraction of what our responsibility is. And so if you want to make this a loan, sure, that's possible, I
want a
guess,
second?
but I can't.
Because it's not on the table.
Well, I mean, the question is, you set up the framework so that, or set
more
up the
important.
question so that you're not gonna vote. I'm gonna ask for a recess to ask them. Okay, I just got a response.
You withdrawing your motion?
No, I just got a response that I hate splitting the difference. Does somebody want to second Councillor Page?
Could you please tell us what your response is?
The
Things I know
response
this is
was
a problem.
anything will work. I mean, he could.
I'm responding to you.
Andrew McBurney, and he's responding to me because I reached out to him. So, which any of you could have done. So his response is anything will work, I would imagine. And then it's the question: is that what is now looking more like?
No, what he's after us to do here is pretty clear to me. He's asking us to get in there. He doesn't care if we give him $1,000 or $35,000.
We're the last.
He wants to see our name on this thing, so he can go to Jenks. We are getting taken here, and I'm not happy with it. I'm not happy how these folks are conducting business. They send, you come up here, Councillor, and I'm sorry, you come forward here with a resolution with no supporting documentation whatsoever. It's a pig in a poke. And to Councillor Page's credit, he's pointing that out to us here. We can't, like, there's nothing preventing those people of showing up at the public meeting at the committee of the whole at any time and saying, look, we're 3 weeks away from the dead. This is like the 11th hour, and we're getting a song and dance about the city's going to flood if we don't throw $35,000. I'll tell you what's going to happen. If somebody doesn't cut some wood at the side of that mountain, it's going to burn. That's what's really going to happen.
That's not what's going to happen. That's absolutely not what's going to happen. This,
No,
we are
I'm
risking.
sorry, I can't support this. This is not, what's happening here is not fair. It's not fair to this table. It's not fair to our community as a whole.
And I will
I'm sorry.
absolutely push back on that, Your Worship. This is absolutely fair. We are talking about an investment into our own city. Like, when it comes down to it, the fact that, and anything else is essentially ad hominem. Is $35,000 worth protecting that slope of forest, given the potential consequences? Simple as that. It doesn't matter
It's
who's
not the
raising it
it's not the
or how
30,
they raised
it's not
it.
the $35,000.
irrelevant.
You know that, and I know that. The
No,
30
I don't. I know
Well-
it is exactly $35,000.
It's,
Okay,
Is that
hold on, hold on,
$35,000?
hold on.
Gotta take
I
a
think we have to
timeout.
time out here. Okay, it is 10 o'clock at night.
yeah,
We've been here for almost 12 hours, people.
yeah.
Because we met here at 1. Like, we're closing in on 12 hours. Our brains are fried. Rick, this is not good. Like, what's happening here is not a good,
It
it's
is-
not a good situation for making a decision. It's not. We're at each other here. This is a lot of money. $35,000 is a lot of money, and we've said no to other people. I just feel like this is not a good place. What we're doing here is not a good place to make a decision. And you can see, Rick, the divisiveness that's happening here.
Yeah, I can, and I'd like to know what's underneath that. Again, the point being, is this about them or is it about Cottonwood? They are just, it's irrelevant who they are, how they did it. The simple question on the table, is that 40 hectares worth $35,000? That's it. That's all we're asking.
I think you're missing the point here.
No, I'm not.
Maybe we should be putting
With all due respect.
$750,000 into it.
I-
But
we
we
may
don't
be.
know. We are not furnished with any information. First of all, you're suggesting we'll have floods if it's cut. We have not seen a report from anybody that proves that.
We haven't asked for it.
But honest to God,
It's
that's
our
not,
responsibility. This is not Cottonwood Lake Preservation Society responsibility. This is our
I'm
responsibility.
sorry, Councillor.
I think we have to.
We're way out of whack here.
Can we?
We have,
No, we can't refer those.
there's
We
too
can't
much
refer
around
this?
this and been rolled into this. To be asking for $35,000 based on that the city's gonna flood if we don't. Maybe we should be paying more.
With all due respect, Your Worship, you have a position in this. You're making an argument. And you're taking it there. I'm responding to your argument. This is escalating. It's not on me.
Point of order, I'm noticing Councillor Anderson's hand is up for a while now between the two of us. Could we try and get the meeting back to decorum? Please.
I would like to second Councillor Page's amendment to the motion.
For a loan?
Yeah.
And just as a point of
How would that
information,
work?
not to put this totally off, but we have assessed Cottonwood Lake, both our own engineers, our own consulting engineers, and the RD has looked at every stream in the region as well, so we do have professionals that have looked at this. I did not know this was about, flood protection, and if that would have been communicated, we could have brought those reports forward to council so you could assess what you feel the risk is. Our challenge as staff is, most groups would at least have come and presented. We got one sort of short email that went to the wrong place initially, and then they did get it to us, and that's all the information we have is we want $35,000. I don't know how much it is towards deal is, how much it is, who else is contributing, you know,
No, I
you
knew
would have
that.
expected
That's
all
not
of
right.
that to come here to, and the group presenting to come, you know, and they did not, as far as I know, request to come present to council to request this amount, so we, the staff, were totally in the dark about this. As far as a loan, yes, we have lent money to other organizations, but again, we would expect them to come up with a plan of how
Budget.
they would
Repay
repay
it.
Okay.
what the terms are, all those sorts of things, so. And does this have to be made today? It seems to, I've heard, they missed their deadline of August 31st, but is it, now it's September 8th?
15th.
15th.
They have an
Is the
extension.
actual date? Do you guys wanna get more information from those folks between now and the 15th, and, real informed discussion on this?
I mean,
Councillor Anderson, you were.
if I may. So, you know, I do believe that we're getting a hell of a deal with 35. I know we have already purchased, you know, we're already purchasing a portion of this land, but I do think that this is, I do think that it, you know, and I would love to see, the flood mapping. I know we've got, you know, we've paid for that information, so it would be, I think, important not only for council to understand that, but for the community to understand that. So I think tonight, by passing this as a loan, we are at least enabling the possibility of having all of the questions that we have answered. And if we do not pass this tonight, we won't ever get those answers to those questions. And, you know, we might find out later that we really wish, you know, that because of the consequences of not doing this, we really wish that we would have taken the opportunity and the risk of providing a loan. I do have some questions about the language that I would just like to give staff's feedback on. It says, if the land purchase deal is not completed, then the total amount be returned to the city. Is that appropriate for the language of a loan versus a contribution?
No, the loan would have to be a guarantee if they made a certain target, they would,
Yeah.
that'd be included.
Yeah, I
I
think
mean, you're not gonna give them 35,000 and,
And-
well, that's not how you do loans.
No,
I think it's safe to say that if we don't figure out something tonight, it will be logged.
or by the 15th.
So it will, yeah. So
Fair enough.
I mean, you know, I went up there a couple days ago, and there already is a whole bunch of brand new logging right up to the road. You know, it's a lot. And then I stopped on the side, looked up, back. I mean, it's going to be this huge logging patch above Cottonwood Lake. So, you know, that's the reality of it. It's going to happen. And, you know, for me personally, it's just this whole idea that, you know, we are exposing this huge piece of land to next year's flood risks. And we already saw it was pretty close this year. We had, you know, the whole RD went on alert, and we were pretty close. We had 140% snowpack.
I think we have
So
those flood risk mapping.
we had that done.
Yeah, we have that.
Yeah, and so it does
Oh, I
show.
thought we have high.
Cottonwood Creek is high risk, is it not?
Yes.
Oh,
Real
Do you
town
remember the
is.
specifics?
I think, point of order, actually, I think we have to vote on the because we're now not even debating the motion of
Yeah,
loan
sorry.
versus not loan. I think we need to either pass this, yeah, we have to vote on the amendment.
Defeat the first date.
No.
Do you wanna put up a motion on blending, we can do that separately
I think so.
with better language, trying to incorporate the
Okay,
old into the new.
I think we'll need a bit of a recess to work on, like, I'm not gonna, unless someone else is gonna put up a motion with language to loan, it has been a long day. Some of us had work before this.
I think we defeat the first one and then deal with the loan. That's my suggestion, and then they're not clouded.
So you're rescinding your,
Yeah, I'll withdraw.
okay.
It's on
So,
the table, you can't.
You can't.
Oh, well then, I'll have the question on the
I just
amendment.
don't think the amendment within that current,
Yeah,
No.
but this here works.
the current, resolution is is really amending.
Oh, his amendment he wants to withdraw.
Okay, so are we gonna vote on the first resolution then?
Yeah.
Okay,
So we're defeating that?
well,
Yeah,
you vote
to
however
get-
you want.
To get to the loan. All in favor?
Of the amendment,
No, of the original motion.
Defeat the original.
of
All
the
in
original.
favor?
Yeah, and then we're gonna rewrite it.
Opposed? You're opposed, right?
No, sorry, sorry.
In favor, sorry, we
What are we
voted
doing
in
here?
favor of the motion.
We're
We're back to the original motion. All
And
those
then
in
we're going to the
favor,
loan.
Of the
35,000.
granting.
okay. So I'm sorry, I'm very tired. I'm sorry.
The
What-
first
we're-
motion, we're on
No,
the first
it's fine.
motion.
Yes.
First motion, the email that Rick
One
sent.
that
Yes.
I made.
We're
That's
voting
what
on
we're
that, but are we?
And then we're going to the loan piece.
If this
That's
is
the-
defeated, then
Go to the,
We'll go to something
I'm hearing
else.
someone's.
And it was
made for
defeated,
business.
because it was
It
for
was.
voted against,
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
You can tell them what you wanted to have your vote.
I would be interested in the loan piece.
Okay.
Okay, I'm trying to have something to just give you.
Okay, let's
Can you
just
just
take
stand up for a
breather.
second?
okay, so the first motion's defeated, so we're
Yes.
clear on that. Now we're moving to the next piece.
Could we?
Let's just be quiet.
Just quiet for a few.
Quiet, like Kevin Wright. How to hear the fastest.
Kevin's writing it, so we're just standing for a second. Do we need to recess?
Maybe, click on that air conditioner.
How many hectares are they buying?
44, I think. Mayor,
You got everything we needed there.
do you want to have in the language of this that we would ask this group to come and present? I mean, would that make things?
Well, they probably could anytime they want, but we're dealing now with this loan piece, and let's get that out of the way, and then we'll deal with the.
We'll ask them to come and present.
I
They'll be
think
happy.
that might assuage some anxieties, but I mean, yeah.
I only want to hear from that society about this topic going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think they should be advocating for themselves.
Totally, 100%.
And obviously, that's like obvious.
Let's hear the language.
All right. So for those, is somebody going to put this forward?
Well, we gotta hear it first.
So here's what it sounds like, and if you want it, you can take it. That the City of Nelson provide a loan of $35,000 to Cottonwood Preservation Society for the purpose of purchase of approximately 40 acres of lands adjacent to Cottonwood Lake, terms to be negotiated. So that would outline the map and what the repayment schedule was, et cetera, et cetera. Does that sound fair? And if somebody wants to put that forward, here it is.
I'll move it.
You're moving it? Okay.
Yep.
Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Okay.
All right.
All right, let's go back in camera.
Are we?
Oh, no, we gotta go home.
49 hectares, by the way.
It's nothing on mine.
No, I think we dealt with that.
Thanks, Kevin.
There was a couple of things that I should update council on though, Kevin. So it'll only take a couple of minutes, so that's okay. Yeah,
So we need to.
sorry, but
Don't we need to adjourn?
we need to adjourn this meeting, yeah.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn, Councillor Anderson.